You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
That's for you, Keith. Fade to Black. Here we go. Welcome. Today is Thursday, March 20th. 79 days into the new year. As always, live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, for KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. That's right, this is Fade to Black. Or Fade to Black. Don't you hate it when people say "tuh" instead of "to"? Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform, fighting the good fight for us all around the world. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us, and you can't hear me right now. Think about it. Here we go, Kraken number one. Actor Michael Rappaport, one of my favorites, 44 years old today. Drummer Carl Palmer. That's right. Emerson, Lake and Palmer. 64 years old. Dude is pretty badass. Our dead guy birthday today is Fred Rogers. Yeah. Mr. Rogers was born in 1928, died in 2003. And I'm going to make a comment a little bit later about grilled cheese and tomato soup, which reminds me of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And if you're old enough to know what I'm talking about, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, Facebook, JimmyChurchRadio.com. That's the fan page. YouTube, KJCR, Fade to Black. Everything is Fade to Black, JChurch Radio, Jimmy Church. You know what to do. Go do it. Like, subscribe, friend, follow. Tonight, we're going to have open lines, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to open up those lines in just a few minutes, and I'm going to take calls right out of the gate. You can always email throughout the show, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. You know how to get a hold of us. You can do it all over the website. You can do it in your own mail program. The dial-in number is 323-825-5045. As soon as I get done with these headlines and comments at the front of the show, I am going to open up the lines. So if you want to get in and be first, after that show last night, I'm sure there's a few comments. Bumper music tonight, as always, is Doug Aldrich. Let's get into a few comments. First off, last night after the show, the breaking news was the wreckage that was found off of the coast of Australia, 1,400 miles west-southwest of Perth. Now, apparently, they've called off the search, called it back on, called it off until tomorrow, bad weather, night, whatever. The question that I have, and I stayed up last night, kept the the old TV on in the bedroom all night long, waiting to see. But this is what I thought of last night. What piece of a plane that large is going to be floating 12, 13 days after splashdown? Seat cushions, maybe some luggage. I get that. But I don't know. I'm feeling weird about this. And I was hoping, I really was, that this thing was just going to get put behind us last night. Wake up today. Here we are. Right back where we were yesterday before that breaking news, in my opinion. Kevin Trudeau. You remember Kevin Trudeau? Kevin Trudeau, the hawker of books on late night television, weight loss, free money, was sentenced this week to 10 years federal time. Oh my gosh. 10 years federal time. And that ain't county time. That's not state time where they let you go after, 2 weeks of a 20-year sentence. This is 10 years federal time, and he can expect to do all of it. And one of the questions that I have, and I tried to find this out, and we worked on it for a day. How much is he really worth? How much of that cash is socked away? And how come he didn't have to return any of it, including to me? I bought one of those books once. And I'm not going to say which one. But with Trudeau, the reason why I bought one of his books, and I happened to buy it at a store. I didn't buy it off of television. But I just thought, okay, all right, it's on sale. There might be something in here. I read that thing cover to cover and got nothing from it. Zero, zilch. And from that point forward, every time I saw him on TV, I knew he was just full of it. And the fact that he was on as much as he was just meant that people are buying his stuff. And I thought, it can't be legal. When is he going to get caught? Well, he did get caught. And that was back in 2004. And they told him, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Well, he did, and he continued. Well, now he's got 10 years federal time. Question is, how much of that money did he save? And I couldn't find out if he had to return, if he was fined a bunch of money. I just couldn't get those details. I would love for somebody to, a listener right now that knows about his situation, to send me an email, tweet, and tell me, well, how much is that guy worth? Did he have to give any of it back? But one of the reasons why I'm talking about Trudeau is dude went and started a radio show. And I caught up to this show maybe about a year ago. And he had on a bunch of, and I listened, a bunch of ufology type guests. And it wasn't bad. That was the shocking thing. And I listened to maybe, I'm gonna take a shot at this and say a half a dozen of the shows, which were long, and each broadcast, but it wasn't bad. And why didn't he just clean up his act and go down another road? Because his shows were not that bad. Kevin Trudeau. Now, this is the question that I have. Who's he gonna pilfer money from in the clink? That would be interesting. So anyway, he's going to be working for somebody. It's a cellmate very soon. The Ukrainian, Russian, U.S. Crimea situation is starting to heat up a little bit more. It kind of went to another level today. Russians are now, sanctioning U.S. politicians. And I read a couple of quotes today. I'm going to paraphrase, but John McCain said something to the effect of, well, I have to cancel my vacation to Sochi. I think that's what he said. Pretty funny. But I was talking to some of my Russian friends about this sanctioning over the last couple of days. Big Russian Armenian community here in Burbank, as everybody knows, in Glendale, California. And they said, look, there are plenty of Russians with money in banks on this side. Sanctioning them is going to hurt. They're going to feel it. There aren't that many Americans with money tied up over in Russia. And I thought about that. And they said, Putin said he's going to come back and he's going to just one-for-one sanction. I said, okay, all right. Well, he did that today. And the list, I looked at it and just thought to myself, well, that's not going to really do anything. But back in the old days of the Cold War, when this stuff started to fly across the borders, the rhetoric, one side going back and responding to the other. Today, it's about money. That's a whole nother thing. And this is why it's such a big deal. Back in the day, there just wasn't any money in the Soviet Union. There wasn't anybody rich, and we didn't know, and who cared about rubles? But today, there's money over there. There's a lot of billionaires walking around, a lot of millionaires, a lot of money. Hit it right there. Now, I thought to myself, that's really going to cause some trouble. But it was the right thing to do. It really was. But that's going to cause some heat up. And wouldn't that be crazy if we had a flare up over there over money? Think about it. The video player is still up on the website, by the way, on the homepage of JimmyChurchRadio.com. To watch the trailer and pre-order Mirage Men. I highly recommend it. And I'm not hawking anything. I'm just telling you. I've seen it, and it's amazing. So I'm going to keep that player up. I'm going to keep it up until that movie comes out. Also, on JimmyChurchRadio.com, on the homepage, you can go now and scroll down, and you're going to see a picture sitting above Dr. Zubrin's gallery. It's a lone picture of the Lost Ark of the Covenant. And it says Richard Royo. And now take a look at that picture and look at the Lost Ark in the background, because that is indeed the Lost Ark. Go check it out. Now, details about what that picture is, I'm going to follow up in a little bit on the show. But it's not about the Lost Ark, which is right there. Go look at it. It's pretty cool. And it is the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Check it out. It's the guy in the picture that is so cool. That guy in the picture is Ricky Royo. He's called Richard now. Ricky Royo. I've known that gentleman since we were little kids down in Panama in Central America. He sat next to me in drafting class for like 3 years. That's a true story. And Ricky, I got a hold of that picture today. He posted it, and I grabbed it, and it's amazing. And for now, I think Ricky lives here in California today. He's Richard now. He's an adult, but he will always be Ricky to me. And the funny thing is this: Ricky, sitting next to me in drafting Mr. Hurd's class for 2 years, 3 years, wasn't that good of a draftsman. I taught him everything he knows, and today he's one of the most successful architects in San Francisco. He's got a huge firm, and he's a cutting edge guy today, and he has really grown up to be a very cool, successful gentleman. But that's what that picture is. And there's more details to follow later on in the show, but thought you'd have fun with that. Okay, the gallery is up for Dr. Robert Zubrin tonight of the Mars Society. That also is on the front of jimmychurchradio.com. And more, obviously, Dr. Zubrin is the guest tonight. We will go over everything in that gallery. He sent us, oh my goodness, he sent us hundreds of pictures. And those were edited by yours truly. And those are my selections. Very cool stuff. And go through those. We will discuss the gallery in detail tonight. Okay, you know what? Good old Brad just sent us an email about plane pieces. Let me read it. Brad, I know you're listening right now, so I'm going to read this live on the air. 79 feet is about right for a wing. He goes on to say, if broken away during splashdown, would probably float if the engine broke away. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. The huge fuel tank would be empty and buoyant. I flew Dash 7 puddle jumpers until I had heart surgery several years ago. Now I work for a living. Right on, Brad. Yeah, you know, I meant to. That's a really good point, and I didn't think about that before I opened up my trap. But one of the things I wanted to ask the pilot that was on the show last night was, what happens to the plane? And I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but this is one of the things, because the Hudson River splashdown touchdown in New York comes to mind. When a plane is out of fuel and those engines stop, something as large as a 777, does it glide? Does it fall out of the sky like a rock? Is there anything that happens? I mean, at what point does it just drop? Or can you just touch that thing down lightly into the water and just kiss just like you would kiss your sister? Just touch it down. Could you do that? I don't know. And the other thing is, and this is the second part of that, when those engines stop, do you have any control over flight, hydraulics, and whatnot? Are those still running by battery? I don't know. But that's the only way to me that anything would still be floating out there, is if the plane didn't just disintegrate on impact. And again, that's just me, but I wish with all of the talking heads out there that somebody would address basic questions like that. And that to me is just a basic question. What would happen? Does it just glide down? Does it not? I'm very curious. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to open up the phone lines right now. There's reasons for that. We will have Dr. Zubrin in about a half hour, which gives me about a half hour to talk to you. And there are a few subjects that I know everybody wants to talk about. The call-in number is 323-825-5045. The lines are open right now. 323-825-5045. Who's going to be first? Let's go. Now, I want to talk about last night's show. I should take a break. You know what? I am actually going to do that. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, I'm going to address everybody's issues about the escapade that went down last night on Fade to Black, and caused quite the furor, didn't it? It did. But you know what? In a weird way, in a not so weird way, I had a lot of fun. And I'll explain when we come back. 323-825-5045. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch that mouse. Back right after this. Stay with us, everybody.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. Fade to Black. Thursday night on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Lines are open. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045 if you want to Skype. Skype is Fade to Black 14. No spaces. Fade to Black 14. All right. Concerning the show last night, I have, as of yet, and we've had some crazy guests, we've had fun guests, we've had controversial guests, but last night, the washback of that show was incredible. The emails came in all night, throughout the day today, post, text, stuff, a little bit on Facebook. I think most people wanted to keep their comments private, and I understand. But let me say this, and I need everybody to please understand. When you are a guest on this show, you are a guest, just like you are a guest in my home. Those are the rules. I'm not going to break that rule. When I tell a guest that we are sitting on my couch talking, that's exactly what we are doing. And if that conversation on the virtual couch turns into, just like it did last night, it's the same thing. And I'm not going to be rude to a guest on this show or in my home. Everybody, I'm shocked because the people that listen to this show every single day know exactly what my attitude is about. Somebody that's tuning in new and heard what they heard last night was probably angry that I didn't kick him off the show or get into the verbal. That's not what this show is about. And I hope that anybody listening right now that was new last night came back tonight to listen to this show. And I said instead of to. They need to understand and hear what I'm saying right now. That's not what this show is about. He's a guest. And he's going to be treated with respect. But on top of that, whether things get argumentative, it's also interesting. Why? Why? It's called a difference of opinion. And we're going to work it out. And we're going to come to a conclusion. Just like if you are sitting on your couch speaking with someone. Now, after that guest leaves my house, that doesn't mean that they'll be invited back. That's a different story. But as long as you're on this show and you are a guest, you will be treated with respect. And trust me, I'm man enough and strong enough and somewhat smart enough to hold my own. So don't you worry about it. And I know you're like, oh, Jimmy, he's going. You know what? I can handle myself. No, don't you worry about that. And in the end, that's exactly what happened last night. So for those of you that tuned out and didn't listen to how the show ended last night, well, that's your loss, but it will be up on YouTube this weekend. And you can go and listen. Now, was the show crazy? Yeah. Did you get Bitcoin to death? That was for Smithy, by the way. Did you get Bitcoin to death? Probably. But it was good stuff. And today I had to respond to a lot of email, a lot of posts, a lot of texts in the same fashion, which was, it was okay. I'm all right. I had fun. It was a good show. I really felt, in the end, pretty good. And I enjoyed myself. All right. A couple of emails just came in. Let's see. This is from, hi, Jimmy. I just went to Facebook where Clifford Stone is a friend, and he tells about how he met his deceased son last night in spirit with an ET to help. And curiously, as he recounts his story on time travel and going back to visiting his son, of course, you know my story, and I do, about time travel. But last night while I was asleep, I clearly saw a human figure with no features standing in while light or mist suddenly before I awoke. At about the same time, Clifford says he had his experience. Is it a coincidence? No, there are no coincidences. Or maybe there are. I'm still on the fence about that. But my experience of time travel was different than what he claims. Indeed, it's too strange. I posted a comment on Clifford's Facebook page about it. Wow, okay. Interesting. I had talked last week. Again, everybody, the phone lines are open, 323-825-5045. I want to get in some phone calls before Zubrin. And I want to hear comments about last night. I want to know exactly how everybody feels. I mean, was anybody offended by the way the guest was acting? Did I handle myself properly? I think that I did. But anyway, back to this email. I had mentioned last week on, I think it was last week on one of the shows about there's an element with time travel, and I believe that time travel is here and it's real. And next week we'll have Ronald Mallett on to talk about time travel and where we are today with it. But there's one element that I have been thinking about more and more, and it's a very simple one. The part of time travel that is appealing to most of us is that we could go back and fix something in our lives. And for me, I'll tell you right now what it would be. If I could take my knowledge of playing guitar today, because I shred today, but when I was a kid, I didn't shred. But if I could go back to 1977 and whip out some Eddie Van Halen or some Randy Rhoads on everybody before those guys came along, that would be cool. That would be really cool. But the part of time travel that is appealing to all of us is that we could go back and fix things in our lives. Well, if you go back with an adult mind and throw that into somebody that's 5 years old, your 5-year-old self, that would be messed up. And you couldn't stand there as an adult you and look at the little you and share that consciousness. I don't think that that would be possible. And the only way to eliminate that, I would think, is somebody's got to go at that point, and that would be the adult you. And then putting an adult mind into somebody young, there's all kinds of things wrong with that, if you think about it. But that's the part of time travel for me, for what everybody thinks. I want to say this correctly. The most appealing part of time travel for everybody, I just don't think it would work. There'd be no way to do it because you're not going to go back with an adult body. It just wouldn't make sense. You would be an adult you back in that time, then you couldn't go and fix things in your life because you wouldn't be the young you. Or you would have to exchange conscious mind. And I just don't think, ethically too, by the way, putting an adult mind in a 5-year-old will be pretty twisted. But anyway, so I just wanted to get that out of the way too. Okay. All right. Now, some of these other emails that came in last night were just a bit out of control. So back to our guest last night. The part, let's see here. Okay. All right. The part that last night that everybody was commenting on was that that the PhD was questionable and that there was no record of a PhD. I don't know. He has been on enough shows and has been vetted, as far as I know, by everybody in the past, I would think. But that was a big question mark that came up last night. And to put doctor in an online bio in front of your name, I think that in today's world, somebody would turn around and catch that and catch it pretty quickly. So that part of it, I let go. But the question came up time and time again last night. How, Jimmy? How can you have guest after guest after guest after guest that are so great and interesting, and then you turn around and there's going to be something like this, but last night it happened. How? And I couldn't believe it was like I felt like everybody was emailing each other. I really, really did. And it just came in one after another. And look, I'm just going to say, I vetted what I could, but I'm not, I leave it to the online world to get somebody into trouble. It's not my job. It's my job to put on a good show. And I think that we did that last night. All right. So with that is the reason why it happened. That's the reason why I didn't cut the guest off. That's the reason why I wrote it out to the end. And I thought it was interesting. And I thought I had fun. And I didn't feel strange today when I woke up. I've had other guests where I just went, wow, what happened? But I didn't feel that way last night. And so that's it. Okay. Now, listen, I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I've got a couple of other things that I want to discuss. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We're getting ready for Dr. Robert Zubrin, Mars Society. We've got a great show lined up for tonight. So everybody, don't go anywhere. Don't touch that mouse. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Follow us on Twitter. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us. (1-800-916-6232). That's the number you need to call when you are seeking spiritual enlightenment and searching for your true purpose here on Earth. www.lovespellstoday.com. They provide psychic readings, love spells, reversal of spells, custom spells, chakra balancing, energy work. Divine guidance is just one phone call away. Call 1-800-916-6232 for your free psychic reading. I did. And tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hello, you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
My name's Nick Dominguez. Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy, your preacher.
Amen. This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Just...
We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. Let's go. Let's get this cracking. Fade to black. Thursday, March 20th. Get the emails coming. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Okay, a couple of quick things. Tomorrow night is going to be a great show, and it's with Steve Murillo. And we are going to have Steve here live in the studio for the full 3 hours. I think we're going to do pizza and beer live on the air, and that should be great fun in itself. We are going to open up the phone lines all night tomorrow night. And one of the things about doing a show live nearly every night of the week, okay, well, is this phone call coming in right now? Let's just grab it. Let's see what we have. You are live on the air right now, Sebastian. How you doing? Sebastian, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you might want to turn down. Remember, you're on a delay, so
okay.
Turn me down in the background.
Right. Okay, how about now?
Okay, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay.
What's going on?
Okay, how are you?
I am fantastic. It's a beautiful night here in Burbank. Where are you calling from?
Edmonton, and it's a very snowy, cold night here. It's like -20 right now.
Well, and that's a great city, by the way. Been there many times. It's kind of strange how it sits out there all by itself in the middle of nowhere, and then you have this great city that just pops up. But yeah, love Edmonton. Okay, so what's going on, Sebastian?
Gotta make it quick. Just a couple comments over your guest yesterday. I don't know, a little bit of useful feedback for you, maybe.
Okay.
I personally believe, and I mean, again, you have to take into account that I'm kind of young. I'm 22 years old. So I might see things differently than the rest of the people that are kind of complaining. I think it was good. I think if there's something you promote a lot is, there's freedom, and this is not a pre-arranged interview, whatever. So, they get to be who they are.
Exactly. And I will say this, and that was kind of that was the way I responded to most of the email, was that this is a live show. And not only that, it's unscripted. So it's going to end up wherever it ends up 2 hours later. You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of it. I don't want to have a list of questions that are submitted by the guest. And you can tell, you know what I mean, Sebastian? You can tell when You're going right down a list of questions, and you're getting the answers almost before you finish the question.
And sometimes it's boring too. Like, it seems like you guys already talked before the show, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna answer this, and then you're gonna answer that, and that's the end of it.
Right. And I talk to every guest before the show. First off, I have to, because I need to make sure that the audio is good and we have clean lines and so forth. But I warn everybody in a polite way, don't give me questions. Don't give me subjects to talk to you about. I can handle it, and every guest is done with the same, is treated the same way. There's nothing premeditated, and that's the way. And so last night, when you have a guest like that, part of the appeal of that, and the reason why I had such a good time, is because we went to places that I didn't expect either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, your previous guest that was kind of like that. What's his name? Well, let's just leave it at empty. He was saying about stuff with Stephen Bassett, and he was affirming he was right on everything, and everybody else was wrong, and Bill Maher is right, and whatever, right?
Right. And
but at the same time, props to you, because you have to be really patient to be like, let him talk, let him, say what their point is, and then be like, all right.
Hey, Sebastian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call. I've got another call coming in. And, hey, call anytime. Stay warm up there.
Yeah.
You are live on the air. Who's calling?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the call. I've got another call coming in.
Oh, somebody needs to turn the radio down in the background.
Got it. Down.
Who's calling?
This is Rick Royo.
Ricky Royo. How are you, my friend?
Yes, my good friend. Jimmy, how are you?
I am fantastic, Ricky. And, well, obviously you were listening to the show tonight then.
Yes, we were.
Now, again, this is Ricky forever. Hey, Ricky, really quick. What do you go by these days? To me, you've been Ricky for 40 years, so.
Yeah. I'm Ricky to all my, my childhood friends. At work, I'm Ricardo. And amongst, peers and that kind, they got to go by Rick. So all three names kind of go. So Ricky's fine. Ricky means you're from the heart.
It's really great to hear your voice, and I haven't spoken to you in person for probably 30, 35 years, and that's a long time.
High school.
Yeah, since high school. Now, for everybody listening right now to the show, go to the homepage, jimmychurchradio.com, scroll down and look at that picture that is there. It's titled Richard Royo with the Ark of the Covenant, the Lost Ark of the Covenant. Go there now. That's who is called. That is who I'm speaking to on the phone right now, Ricky Royo. Now, Ricky and I sat next to each other. It was Mr. Hurd, wasn't it? That was his name.
Yes. Actually, that's right. During drafting class.
Yeah, during drafting class. And what's funny? This is what's funny, Ricky. Is here we are now as grown men, and I was the all-star in Mr. Hurd's class, and you know what I'm talking about. I was Mr.
Yes.
And and here we are so many years later. You are the all-star draftsman, architect, and I'm some Yahoo on the radio, talking about UFOs late at night. So anyway, Ricky and I grew up down in Panama in Central America in the Canal Zone. And one of the things, and I want to get to the picture here in just a second. I want everybody to take a look at the picture, and we're going to talk about it. But we grew up in a dictatorship, first off. We lived in the Canal Zone. We were known as Zonians. And you know what, Ricky, by the way, I still have my Panama tattoo that I got when I was like 15. But anyway, that was a community of Americans, and you can jump in anytime, Ricky. And I'm sure that there are some Zonians right now listening around the country, and they know exactly what you and I are talking about. But we were there when they gave the canal away, when the treaty was signed. And one of the things, and I want you to share your memory of this, and I was thinking about this earlier today. One of the craziest things that happened to us when we were there was when Torrijos decided he was going to march into the canal zone. Remember that, with all of the had that little parade, and it was going to march right in front of the high school. And when that happened, and I was in Mr. Lumley, the geometry teacher. Remember Mr. Lumley with the black beard?
Yes.
Yeah. I would love to know what that was. So anyway, so I looked out the window. I'm in Lumley's geometry class, and I sat next to the windows in the back. And I turned around and looked, and we had U.S. Army tanks and soldiers surrounding the high school. Do you remember that?
Briefly, but it's a little more history to that on my side. If you remember, my dad's so I was born and raised with you in the Canal Zone.
Well, okay.
Hanging out in the Canal Zone
Ricky.
side, but on the Panama side, my dad's little brother was the chief negotiator of those canal treaties. So I was always in that position of, I'm raised on the American side, but I'm Panamanian on the Panamanian side. They're actually the ones that were negotiating that treaty.
And I remember I didn't want to mention that on the air. I mean, because that's up to you. Your family's influence of the political side of the administration of the Panamanian government. I didn't want to bring that up
during that time.
But
no. But it makes the story better because I had to play the fence on both sides, and I seem to have enjoyed better playing on your guys' side.
Those were
a lot more fun.
Now, have you? And I'll say this, Ricky. I miss Panama every single day. I'm so glad that I have the tattoo on my arm that says Panama, because that period for all of us, and I know that you think the same way that I do. Those were really great days, and I just wish, talk about a time machine. If we could go back to 1980, 79, 78, 81, those years were great years for us all. And you were somebody that I've never forgotten. And I'm glad that we have managed to stay in touch, all of us Zonians, because of the internet throughout the years. So, okay, now tell us about this picture. Because the thing is, and I had said earlier on the show, this is a picture of the Lost Ark of the Covenant.
When I first moved from Panama to San Francisco, I was 19 years old, and I met this guy, Mark Anderson. And him and I, great friends, roommates, went to school together. And then when we went off on our own to get our jobs, I went into architecture. He went into the film industry. And he started as a model maker for Industrial Lights and Magic, George Lucas's gig.
ILM.
So throughout the years, we stayed in touch, and he moved his way up to CEO of ILM, Industrial Lights and Magic. So on one of our little get-togethers after work, he invited me over to his office, and we were just partaking on some of our old traditional things that we did together. So he goes, let's go in this freezing room and get away from everybody. So when I'm in this room and I look over, I see the Ark of Covenant. And I have a big connection with the Ark of Covenant. And I asked him, I go, hey, can I take a picture? And he at first said no, because we don't want this out. We're restoring this. It's the original from the movie, and it's going to be, something that the owner of this doesn't want out, et cetera, et cetera. So I go, okay, I'll put it on Facebook. Nobody will find out. So back then, he had also given me a little insight on the whole Star Wars thing, and he had told me that, they're working on more movies and et cetera. So back in, this is about 2010 or 2009, I posted, that in the future, there will be more Star Wars movie. And then today it came out that Star Wars was putting out a movie. So I thought I put that out there as following through on my word that the movies were going to be made. But back to the Ark of Covenant, we all know how powerful that is, and what it has done all these years to the people who believe in that.
Right.
And, the power of it makes all the sense to me, especially that radiation power that we all hear in the Bible. And some people think that's crazy technology, but the truth is the 4 elements that came together that caused the great, Big Bang, 2 of them were nuclear energy. I think they call them lower and upper, or weaker and stronger, as well as electromagnetic forces and gravity, right?
Right.
So that nuclear energy or radiation, whatever, was around in those days. It's just whomever designed it or built it had a way of connecting to that. So those know now about that technology and those forces. It's really drawn me to read as much as I can about the Ark of Covenant. So,
I gotta ask. Did even though that is the Ark that was used in Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's what correct. That's the one. That is the real one. So
that is the real one.
Yeah. Did you touch it? Did you?
Yeah. The truth is, I did it. I got that close, and I was actually nervous.
Ricky.
That sounds good. I know it's just an art piece, but I still had that in the back of my mind.
Of course. So you didn't open it?
With it.
You didn't peek inside?
Didn't peek inside, didn't touch it either. I was just stand next to it.
I am so disappointed. I was hoping you were going to tell.
I thought, I wouldn't have been able to. I don't think they would have allowed me to done anything with it.
Did
being in that room was because I was with the CEO. That's the only reason I was in that room.
Right.
If it had been for him, I would have never been in that room.
Man, I'm sorry. I would have gone up and licked it. I would have done something. I would have done something.
So you know what I would have done if you were there, and I actually did that.
I will say this. I did something really bad once. I'm going to confess on the air, and I can't wait to see the emails. But I was in one of the biggest museums in the world. I'm not going to say what country. It could have been this one. Could have been in Europe. I'm not going to say what. But I walked up to one of the most famous paintings in the world. And I'm standing there, and the group of people that was standing around me, and there was a couple of guards, right? And the group walked away and left me standing there. And I looked around, and one of the guards was looking the other way. One of the other guards just kind of looked the other way, and I walked right up and touched it.
Nice.
I went right up and put my right index finger in the lower right-hand corner and touched this painting. Something made me do it. It was crazy what came over me. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't. I'm not in any way joking. And I walked up.
I hear you.
Yeah. It was.
We all have that.
Yeah, and I backed up and looked, and this guard was looking at me.
Well, I think that has quite to do with your upbringing in the Canal Zone, pushing the envelope and knowing that we can get away with a lot.
I'll tell one little story, and I'm going to make this really quick. We were down at the French Cut cliff diving, and it was myself, all of our friends, Alan Shaw, Bill White, Rocky Gibson. I don't know if you were there, but it was our core group of friends, right? We're all down at the French Cut and jumping. And we looked behind us, and you remember at the French Cut, they had the first cliff that went down into the canal, but behind us was another cliff, that went up, right? And there were a bunch of
makeout cliff.
Yeah. And there was a bunch of Marines at the top. And I how high was that? It was probably 100 feet. A good chunk, good
the
height.
second cliff was up there.
Yeah. And they were rappelling off of these ropes, and I cracked off at the mouth, said something, and these Marines, they come down and they walk straight up to me and go, dude, you're going. Right? And they made me almost it was like at gunpoint kind of thing. So I go up there and I've got my Balboa High School gym shorts on. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So our PE shorts. I go up, they get me into this harness and push me off the cliff. And I had to and I had to rappel down. And and just like you're saying, we used to push the envelope like that. And the things that we did as kids in the canal zone, and you were right there with all of us, man.
Yeah. Jumping into the French Canal off a 35-foot cliff, ships going by.
Yeah, you know what's funny, Ricky? And I want you to tell everybody, we've got share 2 minutes and tell everybody what the French cut was, and the fact that we did that without even thinking twice. I would kill my kids if I found out they were out doing what we were.
Well, it was actually they call it the French cut, and I have to believe that it was because it was the first, the first attempt to the canal was by the French. And then maybe that was their route, but the true reason for that part of the canal was in case there was a war. If you recall, it was right next to the locks. So in case it was during World War II, in case the Japanese or the Germans bombed the canal and destroy one of those locks, they would be able to circumvent the locks and then go through that side canal where we were jumping off from.
An emergency
it was like
route.
A backup to get the ships through.
I did not know that.
Recall there was like another little lake, and then a road that went out to the motocross tracks.
Right.
There was like a little lake on the other side where people would fly the remote control planes.
Yep.
Okay, so that little road was all they would have to lose for the water to flow through, and ships would be able to get out instead of get stuck there at the locks.
Have you been to? I'm going to have to take a break and move on here in just a second. At the top of the hour, we're bringing in our next guest. Have you been back to? Do you go back to Panama often?
I haven't been back since '09, but it's very different. It's very developed, a lot more developed.
When I look,
we live there.
Yeah, when I look at Fort Amador now, where I lived down there, and what they've turned that into, it blows my mind. But at least the yacht club is still there.
It's still there. It's still there.
Oh man, and I want to go back, and I just want to go back and revisit. But I do miss Panama, and I have to say, my old friend, thank you for calling, and don't be a stranger to the show.
Right on, Jimmy. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too, Ricky, and I'll talk to you.
Sure will, friend. Take care.
Thank you, Ricky.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ricky Royo, and that is the beauty of doing this show. Somebody like that is listening and calls in. Very cool. 35 years, man. This is Fade to Black, where you get in and get out, because when we come back, Dr. Robert Zubrin will be right here. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Shoot us an email right now to Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You have any questions for our next guest? Dr. Robert Zubrin, get it going now. Pierce the veil of our producers. Make it good and get it into me. Follow us on Twitter @JChurchRadio. And you know what? Let's get it cracking. Let's just go. Let's move forward. The gallery for Dr. Zubrin is on the homepage of JimmyChurchRadio.com. So go there now, scroll down, and there is the gallery, and we will talk about some of that or all of it during our conversation. So let's get this going right now. Dr. Robert Zubrin is an American aerospace engineer and author, best known for his advocacy of the manned space exploration of Mars. He was the driving force behind Mars Direct, a proposal intended to produce significant reductions in the cost and complexity of such a mission. The key idea was to use the Martian atmosphere to produce oxygen, water, and rocket propellant for the surface stay and return journey. He holds a BA in mathematics from the University of Rochester, an MS in nuclear engineering, an MS in aeronautics and astronautics, and a PhD in nuclear engineering. I would like to welcome to Fade to Black right now, Dr. Robert Zubrin. Doctor, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
All right. Let me crank up this audio just a little bit. We're good. I've got signal, and let's go. Okay. All right, we're good. So you're in Colorado, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now I do the same thing with every guest, and I'm going to do this with you now, which is this is just a conversation. I don't have any questions. There's no premeditated direction for the conversation. It's just you and I talking, and let's just see where things go. And that's about it. So are you ready?
Yes, I am.
How the first thing is the obvious. When you started to put this idea together, did it come from a fascination from childhood? Was this something that you had thought about for a long time? Because as the audience is going to find out very shortly, it is a very thought out, methodical plan that you have put together. How did the idea germinate? Where did it come from?
Well, I certainly had been interested in space exploration since I was a child. I was 5 when Sputnik flew, and that lit the fire for sure. And I became aware within a few years after that clearly Mars was the destination. It's the closest planet that we could settle. But as far as the Mars Direct plan itself is concerned, that came much later. That was when I was already professionally employed at the Martin Marietta Company doing design of planetary missions. And, these NASA missions, the missions we were designing for NASA for Mars were just flags and footprints missions, building gigantic interplanetary spaceships that would fly to Mars, expend all parts themselves while they did it, and only support a few day or week expedition on the surface of Mars, accomplish no real exploration, and have no potential for colonization. And I also read a lot of history, and from my reading of history, if you look at all the great expeditions of exploration on Earth, one thing that stands out very clear is that the explorers made intelligent use of the resources that were available in the environments they attempted to explore. And so I asked myself, how could we do it that way on Mars? And, Mars is the planet that has the resources to support life. Therefore, it has the resources to support technology. How can we put those resources to use? If we can put those resources to use, the same things that make Mars interesting also make it attainable. And so basically, I set myself the task of designing a travel light and live off the land approach to Mars exploration. And if you can live off the land, You've taken a giant step towards being able to settle the place. So that is the kind of exploration I wanted to do. I wanted exploration that could lead to settlement, and that means learning how to use Martian resources and do it starting on the very first mission.
Why? I need to. This is how I think. Why haven't we gotten there already? And I understand, and we're going to discuss, other issues of why. But it seemed like we were on rapid progress in the late 60s, and we get to the moon, and Mars is right there. We can reach out and touch it. Why did we stop? Why didn't we continue that rapid pace that we were on back then?
Well, we had a massive failure of political leadership in this country in the Nixon administration. It was as if Ferdinand and Isabella had reacted to Columbus coming back from discovering the New World and saying, oh, so what? What's so important about that? Now, one reason why Ferdinand and Isabella didn't do that was because they were the same people that sent the expedition out in the first place. Okay, whereas for the Nixon administration, the Apollo program was not invented here. It was somebody else's program. So they spat on it, and they spat on its plans to continue outward, and really, out of partisan disdain, betrayed America's great accomplishment. And we had plans to get to Mars with people by 1981. They canceled it, and they canceled production of the Saturn V, our heavy lift booster. Right now NASA's trying to develop a new heavy lift booster. They're taking decades to do it. They threw that away. They threw away all the Apollo hardware set. And they threw away, by doing that, a lot of the best people, too. People who really made NASA great. And, they destroyed a tremendous national treasure. And we've never recovered from that. We've had occasionally administrations, the Reagan administration, the first Bush administration, the second Bush administration, which wanted to get things going again, but they always had a situation, with Reagan and the first Bush, where they did not have majorities in Congress, so they had a president wanting to do it. In the case of the Gingrich Congress, which wanted to do it, they didn't have a president that wanted to do it. And then in the case of George W. Bush, he had a NASA administrator that didn't want to do it. And he took too long to fire him. That was Sean O'Keefe, who had no business being NASA administrator. And they wasted 4 years that could have been used to move this program forward, and by then it was too late. They had barely gotten the moon program going, and then Obama came in and canceled it, and there was more problems there too. But NASA needs a goal, and the goal should be humans to Mars. You can't have progress without a goal. In the 1960s, NASA had a clear goal: get to the moon by the end of the decade. They did it. Since that time, they've not had a clear goal. And in fact, Sean O'Keefe, that no-good NASA administrator of the first Bush of the early 2000s, he said NASA should not be destination-driven. NASA should not have a goal. This is unbelievable. I've known 5 NASA administrators, and all the rest of them expressed frustration over the idea of the agency being forced to operate without a goal. O'Keefe said NASA should not be, we shouldn't have a goal. We should just work on things, and then things will emerge, which is just crazy.
Should it have been privatized from the beginning?
No, I don't think so. Look, clearly NASA, during the decade of the 60s, accomplished great things. They had a clear direction. They had the nation behind them, and they had a president who was willing to take risks. Okay? I mean, look, Kennedy, say what you will, he had been a torpedo boat commander in World War II. He was not going to say, oh, we can't go to the moon unless you can prove to me that it's going to be safe. Okay? He understood that if you want to accomplish bold missions, you have to take risks. Okay? And the people who did Apollo thought the same way. The mission comes first. Now they say, well, we can't go to Mars until you can assure us it's going to be safe. Well, when is that going to be? That'll be never. Okay?
Right.
And it's just an excuse not to go. Oh, I'd be happy to climb Mount Everest, but you have to assure me it's going to be safe.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Well, one of the things, and as it's different from when you're a little kid, dreaming of being an astronaut, as all of us did in the 60s, it seemed. We were all going to grow up and be astronauts. But now that I'm older and I'm a little wiser and I'm able to understand things more, for me, the difficulty, well, there's a million different things that make it difficult, but traveling between Earth and Mars is the exposure to two things that I want you to discuss how we're going to overcome. First off is radiation. Because of the length of time, it's not so much passing through, the Van Allen belt or what have you, but it's also the length of time that you are exposed to radiation, not only between here and there, but also when you're on the surface of Mars. So how would you overcome that? And also the strength of the spacecraft, which this is a long answer and a long conversation, but I kind of want to start off there with some of the obvious. So how do you overcome the radiation issues for, how long are we looking at this trip being? 2 years, 3 years?
Okay. Radiation. Okay. First of all, what's the flight plan? It's 6 months out, 6 months back, a year and a half on the surface.
So 2.5 years.
2.5 years is the round trip, of which 1.5 is spent on the Martian surface, and 6 months is spent in transit each way. And that's how it's going to be. Okay. And these people who are running around telling you, claiming that they have a system to get to Mars in 30 days are liars.
Right.
They're just liars, all right? And there's no truth to it. They get stories published in Popular Science, but their technical claims are completely bogus. So I'm talking about this Vasimir thing, and where they postulate power sources that weigh 1/100th of what they really do, and all the rest. But so this is how it is, and we can do this with the technology we have now. 6 months out, 6 months back, year on the half on the surface, and there's no realistic prospect of changing that very much. There are some better propulsion systems, nuclear thermal propulsion systems, which could probably get you to Mars in 4 months, but frankly, you'd be better off making it a 6-month transit and using the superior propulsion capability to increase the payload. And make your life support systems and things like this much more redundant and robust by doing that. That would add more to your safety than shortening the trip by a little bit. Now, radiation. First of all, the Van Allen belts are not the problem at all. Apollo astronauts zipped right through them, and we would zip right through them going to Mars. Okay, if Van Allen belts are only a problem if you had a spacecraft that was stationed in medium Earth orbit and was constantly stuck in the Van Allen belts. But if you're going to either the moon or Mars or an asteroid, you go through them in a matter of hours, and there's not a significant radiation dose. All right, so now you get into interplanetary space. What is the radiation hazard? There's two hazards. There's solar flares and there's cosmic rays. They're completely different kinds of radiation. Solar flares come from the sun. They don't come all the time. They come in a big pulse, maybe once a year, in an unpredictable way. Okay? That's how they happen. And the bad news is that they're very intense, in that in a few hours, a solar flare could deliver a fatal radiation dose to an unshielded astronaut. Okay? However, the kind of radiation that solar flares are made of are protons with an energies of about 1 million volts, and that stuff can be stopped by 5 inches of water or things that from the nuclear point of view are essentially the same thing as water, such as food or wastes. And we have enough of that on board the ship to pack it in around a limited central area and create a storm shelter. We call it a pantry storm shelter. So what happens is solar flare happens, the alarm bell rings, the crew goes into the storm shelter. They don't have to be there instantly. Even a solar flare would take hours to deliver a fatal radiation dose. So if they take a minute to get into the storm shelter, it's not a problem. They go into the storm shelter, they stay in there for a few hours until the flare is over, and then they come out, and they're safe. Solar flares were a terror for Apollo, you see, because Apollos were just dashing out to the moon and back. These were 1 week missions, 2 week missions at most. They didn't have much provisions with them, so they didn't have much in the way of shielding, and they were just counting upon luck that since a big solar flare is only going to happen maybe once in a year, and they're doing a 1 week mission, that the odds were 50-1 in their favor that it would miss them. And in fact, it missed all of them, all 6 missions that went out to the moon, and that was fine. If a solar flare had happened, they would have been fried, but they just had the odds in their favor, and it worked out. Now, a Mars mission, on the other hand, you are going to be in space for a year, and the odds are that, in fact, a solar flare will happen sometime during either the outbound or inbound transit. But because it's a 2.5-year mission, you have enough provisions on board to make a flare shelter, and so you can be safe against solar flares that way. Okay? Now, the other kind of radiation is called cosmic rays.
Well, before we get to cosmic rays, just a couple of quick questions about the solar flares.
Yeah.
What is the estimated warning time they would have to get into that pantry?
Well, that all depends. There could be very little, or there could be hours of warning time, depending upon what side of the sun the solar flare came out of and where the Earth was at that point. Now, of course, we could put satellites in interplanetary space stationed all around the sun, and then we'd always have warning against solar flares. But what I'm saying is, even if they were caught by surprise and the first notice they had of the solar flare was when they hit the ship,
right?
If they took a minute to get into the shelter, and there's no reason why it should even take that long, it's a relatively small ship, the total radiation dose they would get would be small and not enough to matter.
If they, and this is the second part of the almost the same question, let's say there is no pantry, or there wasn't time, or whatever, but they were exposed to a massive solar flare, not a small one, but a massive one, and you said it would be a fatal dose. And when you say fatal, is it within hours? Is it a month? Is it 6 months to die with a massive exposure? When you say fatal, what are we really talking about?
Days or weeks.
Days or weeks. So we could potentially, potentially have a day.
But we can have a shelter. We would build the ship with a shelter. That's
exactly. Okay, now let's move on to cosmic rays. Very curious about this.
Okay, cosmic rays do not come from the sun. In fact, it's not really understood where they come from, but they come from outside the solar system, from interstellar space. They come zipping into our solar system with energies not of millions of volts per particle, like solar flares, but billions, thousands of times more energy for each little particle, okay? So you can't stop that with 5 inches of water. You'd need more like 5 meters of water to stop the cosmic rays. And we don't have that much mass on the ship, okay? So you're going to take that dose. That's the bad news. The good news is the magnitude of the dose isn't that much. First of all, it doesn't come in a big rush. It comes as a constant little pitter-patter coming in from interstellar space, little rain of these things. And the total dose that you would get for every year you're in interplanetary space is around 60 rems, okay? And what, as opposed to thousands of rems from a solar flare. Okay, and 60 rems represents about a 1% risk of getting cancer at some time later in your life. In other words, you would not see any instantaneous effect, not in days or weeks or even during the mission. It's kind of like smoking. It just statistically increases your chance of getting cancer. But whereas a typical American smoking habit increases your chance of getting cancer by 20%, this only increases your chance of getting cancer by 1%. Okay, so this is actually, there is a measurable statistical risk that would be incurred from taking the cosmic ray dose, but it is 1/20th of the risk that the average American smoker takes by simply having a smoking habit.
And is it different once you're on the surface of Mars?
Yeah, it is. It's better. The dose rate on the surface of Mars is about half that of interplanetary space, mostly because Mars is under you and it blocks out half of the sky. That is, half of all possible directions are blocked out by Mars. Now, the atmosphere does reduce the dose a little bit. It's kind of a thin atmosphere. It's a very thin atmosphere.
Right.
It is thick enough to block out solar flares, though. So you're not going to get a solar flare dose. If you're on the surface of Mars, if you're out exploring and a solar flare happens, you're safe. You have as much mass above you, more in the way of that atmosphere, than you would on a solar flare shelter inside the ship. Okay, the cosmic ray dose, though, the atmosphere doesn't do much about. You could do something to reduce the cosmic ray dose by throwing sandbags on the roof of a habitat. That might cut the dose down by another factor of 2, so it'd be a factor of 4 less than
right.
So really the place where you can get a dose that you can't do anything about is in transit. And but still, it's a 1% dose. It's
are the cosmic
portion of total mission risk.
Are the cosmic rays constant, or can they also come in waves and fluctuate?
No, they're more or less constant.
They are constant.
There's a 11-year cycle in them, which is caused by the sun's cycle. When you go into solar max, which, by the way, is a period when you have more probability of a solar flare than solar min, the sun's magnetic field extends outward further into nearby interstellar space, and it does, therefore, reduce the cosmic ray dose somewhat. So during the period when you're going to have more solar flares, you're going to get less cosmic rays. But to first order, they're more or less constant. I mean, it varies by 25% between its maximum and minimum intensity.
Is there ever a consideration, and I understand, and you make perfect sense, by the way, and I understand, but is there ever a consideration for maybe extra payload weight and lining something with either water or lead and taking that up with you for extra protection?
Well, you don't want to take lead because that's useless weight.
Okay.
You might take extra provisions, food, which is basically water, okay?
Right.
Or water, and things like that, and these would add to your shielding. And we're going to take enough food and water with us to make a nice, solid solar flare shelter. To take enough food and water with you to shield out the cosmic rays, that'd be much too much.
Right. Yeah, there was one of the illustrations that we have, and I don't know if you're sitting in front of a computer, but you know what I'm about to mention anyway, so you know the picture. But if you are able to get to jimmychurchradio.com and look at the gallery that we have, that would be great. But there's one question that I do have, and in the lower left-hand corner, I have an illustration that I pulled from your website that shows the Saturn V in relation to Falcon 9, Falcon 9 Heavy, Falcon 10, Falcon 20, okay? With and this is like a basic question, but I think it's something that everybody thinks about. The technology of the engines that were in the Saturn V and its efficiency and its thrust to weight ratio, how much better are we today with, like, in the Falcon 20? Are we able to get more up with less engine weight, less fuel, but a higher payload? Have we moved along considerably since the Saturn V?
No. Saturn V engines were pretty good. The Falcon engines, they're a little better. but not decisively so. They're running on kerosene and oxygen, just like the Saturn V F1 engines. Now, the one thing about the Falcons, though, that is significantly better is that they are producing the engines and the boosters at a much lower cost.
Okay.
All right. Now, that's different. Okay. Now, that has to do both with manufacturing, but frankly, more to do with contracting and the way that SpaceX was created. Okay, and this is even more true, not so much against Saturn V, but against its successors, the Atlases and Deltas that are being flown today, which are way overpriced. And the reason why they're overpriced is because of the cost-plus contracting system, where what happened, this is really stupid, but these various politicians said, oh, we heard these aerospace contractors are making giant profits on their contracts, so we don't want that. They're cheating the public. And therefore, what we're going to do is we'll pay them their costs plus a small profit, say 8%, okay? So whatever their cost is, we'll pay it, and then we'll pay 8% more. And that way they won't make 100% profits on their contracts. Well, guess what? That means that the more the costs of the aerospace company are, the more profit they make, okay? That is, by increasing their overhead, they increase their costs. So, for instance, at Martin Marietta, Lockheed Martin, when I was there, the overhead rate was like 350%. It was ridiculous, but we made profit as a percent of total cost, which included direct cost plus overhead. Now, the SpaceX, on the other hand, while it's mostly funded by NASA today, during its founding period, it was mostly funded by Elon Musk out of his own pocket. And even later on, and today, it's partially funded by Elon Musk out of his own pocket. So SpaceX spends money as if it was their own, because part of it is.
Right.
And they developed a minimum cost production system. And so, for instance, the Falcon 9 was developed for a development cost of $300 million. Now, I published that fact in an article in Space News, which is the industry weekly, and an analyst from Science Applications International, which is an analytical company employed by NASA, wrote a letter rebutting me to say that is absolutely impossible. Our costing models indicate that to develop a vehicle of that character, which is, say, a medium lift launch vehicle, 10 tons to orbit, would cost at least $2 billion. Okay? Well, SpaceX wrote in and corrected them and said, no, it cost us $300 million. Okay? And so they developed that vehicle at 1/7 the cost that is currently standard in the industry. So the real step that SpaceX has made, okay, is not so much that their vehicles are better than the other vehicles. Their launch vehicles are not identifiably better, but they are as good, and they're being produced at 1/7 the cost.
Well, okay, so it would actually the consideration here is money, not because I'm assuming this is kind of how I think that we would be building magnitudes more efficient engines, less fuel. I'm really surprised, as I've done my research over the last few years into this about the whole kerosene model. I would have thought that we had moved on past that. Whatever the propulsion method, but something that would be, twice the thrust with half of the size of the engine. But really, and I was surprised to find out that basically those ratios are the same. Well, the engine, the weight, the fuel is still putting up the same amount of tonnage. We're not building a more efficient rocket that is putting,
300 tons out into space with half of the fuel. We're not there, are we? That's my point.
Well, you're correct. Now, it has to be said, those rocket engineers in the 1960s weren't dumb, and they understood
Absolutely.
about rockets, and they developed them to within 90% of current performance. And now, there were things that they were working on that could have gone much further, but which were cut off. For instance, you measure the efficiency of a rocket engine by a measure called specific impulse, which is given in seconds. The specific impulse of a rocket engine is the number of seconds a pound of fuel can be made to deliver a pound of thrust. So, for instance, Wernher von Braun's V2s, those engines had a specific impulse of about 240 seconds. Okay? The kerosene, oxygen rocket engines, depending upon how they're built, and if they're upper stage or lower stage engines, can have specific impulses between 300 and 330 or so, maybe 340. Hydrogen-oxygen engines, like on the space shuttle, or the upper stages of the Saturn V, can have specific impulse of about 450 seconds, okay? And that's the best that they actually have of chemical rocket engines. And there's not much of a prospect of pushing much. I mean, maybe you could get to 460 or 463, but nothing that would really change anything.
Right.
Well, in the 60s, they were working on nuclear thermal rocket engines that would have specific impulses of 900 seconds. Okay, that is twice that of the chemical engine, of a hydrogen-oxygen chemical engine. Almost 4 times that of a V2. And they got to the stage where they tested them on the ground for an hour at a time, firing away with, 75,000 pounds of thrust, which is significant. And and this is what was going to be used for the Mars mission. Well, when Nixon canceled the Mars mission, they canceled the nuclear rocket engine program. But so in other words, they were working on engines. In 1968, they were test firing on the ground engines with twice the specific impulse of any engine that exists today.
Was it a fear also maybe of what would happen if something catastrophic happened, an accident in our atmosphere with the, possible nuclear, debris flying all over Orlando?
That wasn't it at all. As a matter of fact, it's kind of odd if you go back and look at the debates, because believe it or not, in the 1960s, the Democratic Party was pro-nuclear. Okay, very much so, and the environmentalists were pro-nuclear because nuclear power would be cleaner than coal or oil. And the great champion, in fact, of the space nuclear power rocket program was none other than Senator Alan Cranston of California, who was a very liberal senator.
Right.
But he was the champion. He defended that program like a junkyard dog when Nixon tried to cancel it. He managed to save it for a year or two, but then eventually was defeated. So no, it wasn't that. It was when you killed the Mars mission, there was no longer a requirement for the nuclear rocket engine, and so without a mission, technology doesn't get developed. See, that's the thing.
Right.
Okay, and so without a goal, NASA doesn't develop any technology. And Sean O'Keefe, the bad NASA administrator that I mentioned before, he said NASA should be technology-driven, not destination-driven. And then the technologies would emerge and you'd find yourself able to do missions. But it doesn't work that way. Because when you say technology-driven, then you have basically technologies being developed because there are various lobbies here or there which want to be funded. And so the reason for any of these technologies tends to be weak and could be shifted at any time if, this or that faction loses an influential senator that was defending their position. And so without a solid imperative, but just momentary political advantages supporting the funding of this program or that. They never, ever managed to get funded all the way to flight status.
Is there, and go with me on this, Doctor. Okay, just go with me. You see this in the movies all the time, but is there, if an emergency so arised today, whether it would be some a meteorite, on a collision course to Earth, or we needed to get up to the ISS, or there was a reason right now, do we have the ability right now to get into space? I mean, is there some secret program where they, no, actually, we have a way to get there.
Send people to orbit if the Russians stop.
Yeah, do we, in an emergency, do we have a way to get there right now?
Well, to orbit, yes. We could put people in the Dragon, the SpaceX capsule, which is able to deliver people to the space station, and it's just being delayed from executing that function by the NASA bureaucracy. That could be used to transport people to the station and back down again. And that's a demonstrated capability. Okay, but that's only to Earth orbit. Now, if you're saying, do we have the capability of doing like they did in one of these movies 10 years ago where they sent a crew out to intercept a killer asteroid and deflect it?
Right.
No.
No.
In fact, let me tell you something. During the mid-'90s, when I was working at Martin, there was this comet that was discovered. I think it was Hale-Bopp. Was the name of it. And it came zipping into the solar system. And I suggested that we see what we could do to throw together a space probe and go and do a flyby and just photograph it close up. Now, it's not deflect it. Just could we scramble a probe that could just get up there quick and photograph close up this unexpected new comet, okay? And we did a study of that, and it just was not possible to put that mission together in time to intercept Hale-Bopp. And once again, just not to deflect it, just to do a close intercept.
A drive-by.
And fly some capsule. They could not throw that together. So we're a long way off from having effective planetary defense. And, Carl Sagan used to say that all species either become spacefaring or extinct.
Right.
Because if you can't control the traffic of planetary objects flying around, sooner or later one's going to slam you.
I would like to think that we had that capability, that it was there and that it was being developed and I don't like to feel like we're helpless. But in a way, we are. If anything happened, really, Hollywood's not going to come along and save us. It's just not going to happen, and we just don't have that ability. And I just can't believe we let 25, 30 years go by without continuing any kind of development at all.
No, it's really crazy because we've been aware of this near-Earth asteroid danger since, I guess, the 80s. When it was proven that the dinosaurs had been wiped out by a small asteroid impacting the Earth. And that dramatically made it clear what we were dealing with. And so we've had 30 years now. And other than launching some telescopes to, map out the near-Earth asteroid population and count them, but we've done nothing. And every few years we get a flyby that comes within a few thousand miles of the Earth. And we have statistical models to show that we can be impacted. And, look, we actually had a close call last year, and they still haven't owned up to this. When the asteroid came close to the Earth and all of a sudden this Russian city got shaken up with all the windows blasted out.
Absolutely.
Okay, and it happened that day. They said, "Oh, that has nothing to do with this asteroid. No, absolutely nothing. That's a coincidence." Well, no, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a small fragment of that thing that was probably co-orbiting with it, and which was actually hit the Earth. So that's how close that thing came to us. It came close enough that a small fragment of it could blow out all the windows in Chelyabinsk. And I'll tell you something else that happened that a lot of people don't know about. In October 1990, October 1990, a small asteroid hit the Pacific Ocean, and it had an impact that released energy comparable to the Hiroshima bomb. Now, no one was hurt by that we know of, because it was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But if that thing had arrived about 8 hours later, it would have landed right in the middle of the American and Allied forces assembling for Desert Storm. Okay, and everybody would have thought it was a nuclear attack.
That would have been I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound, what's the word, cavalier, but that would have been completely out of control and would have unleashed. Yeah, wow. And the thing is this, with the development of everything that you've been doing with the Mars Society, and we're going to get into that, and I think it's very exciting, and I would like to do that now. But if you had been moving along at a clip and ready to go, when do you think you would potentially be ready to fly to Mars? I mean, we're going to get into the technology in a second, but if with everything that you have planned and proposed over the years, could you have been ready 5 years ago?
Yeah. Basically, we can be on Mars within 10 years of program start. Okay? So if, in fact, we had started the Mars program in 1990 when we first proposed Mars Direct,
right,
we would have been there by 1999, and we'd have a permanent Mars base today, and the first children born on Mars would probably be entering elementary school on Mars right about now.
Why? I have to say, it gets me angry, but why aren't we there? And I'm sorry, you probably haven't listened to this program before, but one of the big question marks that I have, and you addressed this a little bit ago when you're talking about the director of NASA, but we're sending up, to me, nearly useless stuff to Mars. Nearly useless. We haven't gotten back anything useful. The breakdowns, the bad launches, the bad landings, everything that could go wrong has possibly gone wrong. Excuse me.
I would disagree with that.
Well, but I'm just saying my perception. Okay. I haven't, as a citizen of the United States, I have as of yet to pick up the newspaper or read online something that has just made me jump up and down and go, yeah, that hasn't happened. If we had people there, that would make me jump up and down and go, yeah.
Well, sure, if we had people there, we could do much more. But what I disagree with is that the robotic probes, I don't think they're useless at all, and I think the program overall has been tremendously successful. While none of the Russian probes to Mars have been successful, 70% of the American probes to Mars have been successful, and we've got 2 rovers actually operating on Mars right now. We've got satellites scouting it. We have, with those satellites, we've identified areas on Mars that are 60% water by weight in the soil. We've identified places where water has broken out of the side of craters and run and created gullies within the past 10 years. That is to say, we know now that there's underground liquid water on Mars, which means there could be life on Mars. We know a lot more about Mars because of these probes, and people sometimes say, like in 1990 when we post Mars Direct, people said, well, before we go with people, shouldn't we send some more robotic probes? I said we could use 1 or 2 more robotic probes. Well, we've had since then, the Spirit, Opportunity, and those two, like about 8 more probes. and of which 6 have been successful. And so we've got that data. We have high-resolution photography taken from orbit, so we now know where the safe landing sites are. We got that stuff. That's all very useful. The problem is to just leave it there, and that's where I do agree with you entirely. Okay, we should have had robotic probes before we sent people, and now we have, and now we should go.
Yeah, and we've collected all the data. To me, I think we've gone about as far as we can go, unless we send up a robotic probe. I think I said this on the show last week or the week before. One with a huge shovel on it, like a bobcat, like a backhoe. Yeah. I don't want to dig. I don't want to drill a half inch into a rock. Let's send up something significant that, let's really plow into this. Let's really turn over some soil and let's really see what's under there. Other than that, I want astronauts there.
We got to send people. And look, you want to look for life on Mars, okay? Even just scouting for fossils. I live here in Colorado, which is dinosaur heaven, and many of the greatest dinosaur fossils have been found here. You could land 100 robotic rovers in the Rocky Mountains. You'd never find a dinosaur fossil, okay? And if somebody was exploring Earth from afar with robots, they could have landed all they wanted, and they'd never know that there were ever dinosaurs here.
Right.
And to find dinosaur fossils, which, by the way, are much more conspicuous than the kind of fossils of microorganisms that we'd be looking for on Mars, you got to send real live rock hounds into the hills, and they got to look around and use intuition to find places where they might be and to make them out, and then to dig them out and carefully break open fossil shales to find the fossils pasted between layers of rock, and do heavy work, pickaxe work, yes, and all of that delicate work. You can't do this with robots. And then if you want to look for living life on Mars, which is probably in this groundwater underground, we're going to have to set up drilling rigs on Mars, drill down 1 kilometer, bring up water, take it into a lab, culture it, try to grow the microorganisms, then do testing to understand their biochemistry. This is just light years beyond the capability of robotic rovers. There isn't a robot on Earth that you could send to the store and buy a bag of carrots, let alone conduct a sustained program of field exploration. And so that's fantastical. And then going beyond the issue, because ultimately Mars is more important than just science. Mars is a place that we can settle and establish a new branch of human civilization. And obviously, if you want to have a new branch of human civilization, you got to send humans.
I just want to get to this one email. It's a great question, really quick. It said, Dr. Zubrin said, cosmic rays come from outside of the solar system, but we don't know from where. Is he implying that our own solar system doesn't create any? That's a great question.
Well, not of this type, no. Because these cosmic rays, see, the sun is powered by nuclear fusion reactions, and fusion reactions can create particles with energies of millions of volts, and cosmic rays have billions of volts. So the kind of physical processes that would create cosmic rays are not evident in our solar system. They may be from quasars or things that happened at the origin of the universe, or other physical processes that involve energies greater than the nuclear fusion that powers the sun. Maybe it comes from supernovas where certain other kinds of things happen. But they're not produced by the sun or the planets.
With I want to get into MDRS right now. I want to talk about this, but that publicity, it was about a year ago, 6 months ago, where they wanted couples to go to Mars and not come back. That wasn't.
You're talking about Mars One.
Yeah, that wasn't you, was it?
No. That's an organization that's based in Holland, which says that they are going to raise the money to send people on one-way missions to Mars and establish a colony there. Now, there's nothing technically infeasible about this. If you can go to Mars round trip, it's actually easier to go one way. And it's not a suicide mission, provided you have the resources to keep sending more people, more supplies, more equipment, and everything. In other words, you don't abandon the people on Mars. You reinforce them until you take the planet. Now, so there's nothing technically infeasible. If the U.S. government decided to do that, it could do it. The question of whether Mars One can raise the resources to do that is another question altogether. And right now, they don't have the resources to do that. They do have a lot of people rooting for them, and if somehow they could organize those people and organize the much larger base of people around the world who believe it's important that humans expand into space to support this monetarily, then it could be done. But and I think, by the way, it will be done someday, okay? Because, look, there's 7 billion people on the planet. 1 billion live in the advanced sector like the United States and Europe and Japan, where people have the kind of money to think about this kind of stuff and aren't worried about starving to death tomorrow. And and of those billion people, at least 10%, maybe 20%, believe it's essential for a positive human future that we expand into space. So that's at least 100 million people believe we need to go into space. And 100 million people times $100 a year would be $10 billion a year, and that would be enough to fund the colonization of Mars and the whole rest of the solar system, too, if it was done in the private sector. But the question of whether Mars One can organize that support remains to be seen. But someday someone will do it. Okay, someday someone will do it. It's just like Musk. Musk is not the first person who wanted to start his own private rocket company. There was a whole bunch of them before him, and they failed. Okay, there was the Beale, there was Walt Anderson, there was Conestoga, there were others. But finally, you had somebody with the resources, with sufficient capital to make and sufficient smarts to pull it off. And if Musk should fail, because he might, 3 launch failures in a row could sink him, someone else is going to come along and do it, because this is an idea whose time has come.
With the reason why I ask you if you were, I was saying it in jest a little bit about Mars One, because for you, it's two different philosophies in your approach to this. One, you're asking for people to sign up and not come back. And then, there's an appeal to that too, by the way, not coming back. But yours is 2.5 years, 6 months, a year and a half on the planet. We have to wait for the orbit and everything to line up to get back to Earth. Now, with your with MDRS, and I'm looking at, and I've been doing this all week, by the way, looking at your crews. And now you've got these guys spending, what is it, about 2 weeks? Yeah.
Well, the MDRS crews, that's our Mars Desert Research Station. We've got crews doing 2-week tours. Occasionally, we've done some 1-month tours over there. We're now in like our 144th crew. We've had over 800 people.
And this is my question, Doctor, if you don't mind. Do you have any problems with volunteers, and how do you put these crews together? And because it looks to me, you've got crews shooting out, like you were just saying. You're on 141 right now, and you're continuing. No problems with volunteers and getting people to commit to this project?
No problem with finding volunteers. As I said, we've had 800 people who've been a member of one crew or another, selected out of about 2,000 volunteers. We have almost 3 times as many volunteers as we can accommodate. So we get more volunteers all the time, and we've gotten them from all over the world, by the way. Sometimes they volunteer as a complete crew, sometimes as individuals.
What are the restrictions?
Well, in MDRS, at least 18, no more than 65, good health. They have to have a skill that is useful as a member of a crew. The best, actually, the prize skill is that of mechanic, if you want to know.
Right.
Because things are always breaking down. After that, the next prize skills are those of the field scientists, geologists and biologists.
Right.
We like to have a person who can write well on the mission. We like to have a person of words who can write a good journal for the mission. There's lots of different skills. But have we had problems finding volunteers? Not at all. Have we had problems with the crews when they're there? Occasionally. Most of our crews have worked very well. We've had some problem crews. There's no doubt about it. But of those 140 crews, I'd say at least 130, maybe 135 have been entirely satisfactory. Now, right now, though, we're in the process of putting together a one-year mission to our Arctic station. This is called Mars Arctic 365. And by the way, we have an Indiegogo campaign going right now to raise money to do this, because it's going to cost about $1 million. So we want to raise $100,000 of it on the Indiegogo site. There's a link to that on the Mars Society site. But this mission, we have two stations, one in the American desert, one in the Canadian Arctic on Devon Island, which is an island. It's the largest uninhabited island in the world. It's as big as Ireland, and it's a polar desert with a meteor crater in it, just like one that might be on Mars. It's created all kinds of Mars-like geology, and we built a station there, and we've done a number of one-month missions there. Now we want to do a one-year mission there, and we're going to put a crew of 6 people there who for a year will conduct a sustained program of field exploration, doing all the same kind of things that a crew would do on Mars, doing it in the same style as they would have to do on Mars. Like, you can't go outside without wearing spacesuits. Right. And by doing it that way, learning how to explore on Mars. And a year on Devon Island, our Mars mission is going to be a year and a half, but a year and a half, it's pretty much the same kind of thing. In other words, this mission is going to be out there for more or less the same length of time as a crew would be on Mars, doing the same kind of stuff that they would do on Mars in a place that really is one of the most Mars-like places on Earth. We put out the call for this. We got over 200 volunteers to be part of this mission, and we've selected at this point 62 semifinalists, and they're from about 16 different countries. And we will then do a down select to about 18 finalists, and then we're going to put them in 3 crews of 6 and put them up there for 2 weeks each, see which one works the best as a crew, and choose that crew for the mission.
Now, we have 2 pictures of the Arctic Research Lab, and so if you go to the gallery right now at jimmychurchradio.com, the top right and the top row, top right, that is, I selected this picture, Doctor, because of the crew was standing in front of it, so you can kind of judge about the size of it, but also because they are in their spacesuits. And then all the way in the bottom row is a close-up of the research lab, the research station. So what I want you to do for me, if you could, in the top picture, which I think was called Plate. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one with the three researchers coming out of the research station.
Yeah.
Now, so I want everybody to look at this and understand a couple of things, and these are the questions that I have: technical, logistical, but obvious. The diameter of this is the same diameter as the rocket, correct? So this is 10 meters across.
It's 8 meters across.
8 meters, okay.
Which is the same as the diameter of the Saturn V or the shuttle external tank. It's the tooling that is available in Michoud, Louisiana, that was used to make external tanks with Saturn V's. So this is the diameter that a Mars module could have.
And the height would be about the same then. Are we looking at 8 meters in height?
Let's see, it's 20 feet, not quite 8 meters.
Not quite, okay.
Let's see, 6.5 meters tall.
So 2 stories. You've got 2 floors inside this guy.
Yes, that's correct.
So
the upper deck is where they live. The lower deck is more of a cargo hold workshop kind of place.
And how is this going to deploy to the surface of Mars via parachute? Is that the intention?
It would have a parachute to slow it down. And, well, there's some alternatives here. You could have a parachute and a sky crane above it, just like was used to land Curiosity in 2012. and then you wouldn't need rocket engines underneath it. Or you could have rocket engines under it, which we did not bother to include in this module.
Okay. Now, and what would the sequence now? The reason why I want everybody to look at this first, there's a sequence of events that you have proposed. We're not sending astronauts up with an RV and they're going to just land on. So the sequence of events is the first thing that would happen with your Mars project would be what?
Oh, in Mars Direct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What in Mars Direct is done with 2 launches of a heavy lift vehicle comparable to a Saturn V moon rocket. And by the way, I have very detailed explanation of this plan in my book, The Case for Mars, which is available at Amazon. The first launch sends to Mars an Earth return vehicle with no one in it. Okay? This is a relatively modest cabin, not 27 feet in diameter like this one, but only 15 feet in diameter, because what it also has is 2 substantial rocket stages that run on methane oxygen propellant. However, they're not filled with propellant now, except for some of the lowest stage tanks that are later going to contain methane, have about 6 tons of liquid hydrogen in them. Then after it's landed, okay, a pump is run in the Martian atmosphere, which is made of carbon dioxide. We react that with the hydrogen to produce a large supply of methane and oxygen rocket propellant. That fills up the tanks. So we turn 6 tons of hydrogen from Earth into 108 tons of methane, oxygen, bipropellant on the surface of Mars. So now we have a fully fueled Earth return vehicle sitting, waiting for us on the surface of Mars. Once that is done, at the next launch opportunity, the other heavy lift booster is launched, and that shoots a module just like this one to Mars with a crew of 4 astronauts in it. Now, we actually, in the Arctic and the desert, use crews of 6 because we can. But on an actual Mars mission, you might have to go down to 4 in order to keep the weight of the mission down by keeping the weight of the supplies down. And but anyway, crew of 4 goes out in a module like this and lands near the Earth return vehicle. This then is their house on Mars for a year and a half. It's their laboratory, it's their base. And they use it to explore Mars. And then at the end of a year and a half, they get into the Earth return vehicle and they take off and they fly directly back to Earth. They leave the habitat module behind on Mars. So each time you do this, you add another one of these to the base. And before you know it, you've got the beginning of the first human settlement on a new world. There's nothing in this that's fundamentally beyond our technology.
The question that I have is the Earth return vehicle. How far along is this in its design, and is it your design?
Well, we don't have an Earth return vehicle at these Arctic and desert stations.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, do you have a working proposal together? Has this already been?
What we have, okay, look, in terms of the actual technology, the kind of engines that run on methane and oxygen have been demonstrated. They would be variants of the Pratt & Whitney RL-10, which currently run on hydrogen and oxygen. They could also run on methane and oxygen. In my own lab and at several other labs, we've demonstrated the kinds of machines needed to turn the Martian atmosphere into methane and oxygen propellant, which is the key trick here. The key trick here is to be able to use Martian resources to make the return propellant. Because if we couldn't make that propellant on Mars, we'd have to deliver 100 tons of propellant to Mars to fly this thing home. And to just give you an example, okay, the vehicle itself weighs only 20 tons. And so the propellant weighs 5 times as much as the vehicle. Okay, it's one thing to deliver a 20-ton vehicle from Earth to Mars. Right. It's another thing to deliver 120 tons.
Right.
Okay, so you see, we couldn't do the mission that way if we had to bring the propellant from Earth.
What is the what's the gravity difference between Earth and Mars? We all understand the moon, but what exactly are we dealing with there?
Mars is 38% the gravity of the Earth. So 100 pounds on Earth weighs 38 pounds on Mars.
So we don't need a rocket. We don't need a rocket to get off, and we're not
Well, you do need a rocket to
Well, I don't mean...
But it's easier, yeah.
Yeah, it's much smaller. And also, we're not launching up a bunch of tonnage either. Our interest is 4 astronauts and a capsule getting to its... Or are they returning to Earth in the very same thing that they're leaving the Mars atmosphere with?
Well, okay, now there's 2 ways to do it. In the Mars Direct plan that I originally proposed, where we make that 100 tons of propellant, we shoot them all the way right back to Earth. Okay, and so there's no other ship. There's just the Earth return vehicle and the HAB module. 2 launches, 2 payloads, that's it. And no on-orbit assembly, no orbital rendezvous in the mission of any kind. Now, there's a variant to this that after NASA began to take my idea seriously, that the Johnson Space Center came up with, that I call the Mars Semi-Direct Plan. They called Design Reference Mission 3. But it was just like Mars Direct, except that there were 3 launches instead of 2. One was a HAB module just like this. Another was a Mars ascent vehicle that went to the surface and would make its fuel on the surface, but it wouldn't fly all the way back to Earth. It would just fly up to a high Mars orbit and rendezvous with an Earth return vehicle stationed there, which would then be pushed home by its own propellant, which does come from Earth. Now, if you do that, you only have to make 30 tons of propellant on Mars instead of 100, but you do need 3 launches instead of 2 to do the same mission.
With and I don't want to bring Hollywood into it, but I do live in Burbank, so I kind of live it every day. Is there a feasible way to turn the atmosphere there around, or is that purely Hollywood science fiction?
Oh, you mean to give Mars a breathable atmosphere?
Yes.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be done like in Total Recall, by pulling a switch and then 5 minutes later Mars is transformed.
Right.
Mars was once a warm and wet planet. We know that because we can see water erosion features on the surface of Mars, which could not be there in Mars's current cold and dry climate. So why was it warm and wet in the past? Because it had a thicker carbon dioxide atmosphere that gave it a very strong greenhouse effect, and that made it warm enough for liquid water and thus rivers and streams and erosion. Okay. Well, how could we recreate that? Well, by creating a greenhouse effect on Mars on purpose. Now, everybody hears about the greenhouse effect on Earth and global warming and all of that. Well, if we wanted to do that on purpose, what would we do? Well, the strongest greenhouse gases we know are artificial gases called chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, and also a related set of compounds, a bit simpler, called fluorocarbons, CFs. And the CFs are better because they can last a long time in the atmosphere and they don't destroy ozone. So if we had Martian colonies that would set up factories to build CFs, fluorocarbon gases, and release them into the atmosphere on purpose, not just by accident when a refrigerator breaks or something, okay, but just produce them and throw them up there. And we did that at the same rate we currently produce these sorts of gases on Earth. Within 50 years, we'd warm Mars by 10 centigrade. And that's a lot. And if you warmed Mars by 10 centigrade, that would cause a lot of carbon dioxide that is currently sponged into the Martian soil to outgas and thicken the carbon dioxide atmosphere. And, of course, carbon dioxide is also a greenhouse gas. And that would turn the 10-degree centigrade rise into a 50-degree centigrade rise, which would be so warm that the water that's frozen into the Martian soil right now would melt and start to flow out and fill up those streams and rivers and lakes and oceans of Mars again and give Mars a hydrosphere, and water would evaporate and would come down as rain. And with a thick CO2 atmosphere and with rain, you could start spreading plants around. And the plants would grow quite well with water and lots of carbon dioxide to feed them, and start putting oxygen in the atmosphere. And
how long of a and what kind of span of time are we talking about?
All right. Now, to do this first step of churning Mars into a warm and wet planet with a thick CO2 atmosphere and liquid water could be done in about 100 years. Now, for the plants to then create enough oxygen for us to breathe, if we're talking about the kind of plants that exist today, would take about 1,000 years. But here's the thing. Who says the kind of plants that exist today are the only kind of plants that could be? If we're talking 100 years in the future, it's hardly a leap of imagination to think that we could use genetic engineering to develop plants that are more efficient at photosynthesis than the kind of plants that nature has given us.
Right.
I mean, frankly, if you look at an ear of corn that you buy at the supermarket compared to its ancestry, these tiny little things that the Aztecs grew, we've greatly increased the efficiency of all kinds of crop plants that we use. And that's just through traditional methods of agricultural breeding. With genetic engineering, we could do much more. So if we were to create much more efficient photosynthetic plants, this process could be accelerated greatly.
Now, is this part of, I didn't read that it was part of it, but is this part of the Mars Direct big picture?
Well, it's part of my overall vision.
Right.
No, the Mars Direct is just the plan of how we can explore Mars in our time, and then move on from there to build the first permanent bases and settlements on Mars. Terraforming Mars is a bit further in the future, but I think it's important to have in mind the vision of what we're really trying to do here, which is not just plant an American flag on Mars so that we can feel proud of that, or even to find out if Mars has life or had life and help advance science. It is to establish new branches of human civilization. It is to create a new living planet. We're not just going to bring life to Mars. We're going to bring Mars to life.
And so which is kind of the same question that I'm asking, which is, what would be you know what? I'm going to come back to this question in just a second. I just remembered the question I was going to ask, which is, so let's suppose it's terraformed. Let's move 1,000 years into the future, 500 years into the future. We've got trees, life, birds, everything, and Mars is now habitable. But because of its orbit and its relation to the sun, is it the same kind of day, winter, cyclical situation that we deal with here on Earth, or is there a drastic temperature change? Is it on average 100 degrees below zero? Is it on average? It's certainly not hotter. Is it, or would it be a warmer atmosphere? Its orbit is further from the sun, and I don't want to sound elemental here, but if we go and make all of these changes, is it something that we could actually live on?
Yeah. Okay. Now, if we look, we can raise Mars. Mars right now is colder than the Earth because it is further from the sun, but if we put the right amount of greenhouse gases in its atmosphere, we could raise its temperature to be like the Earth. Now, Mars has a day that's 24 hours, 40 minutes long, so the day-night cycle there would be very similar to Earth, okay? So not much difference there. And its axis is tilted at about 24 degrees, which is very similar to the Earth's axis, so the intensity of the seasons would be similar, except that Mars's year is 23 months long, 23 Earth months long, and almost twice as long as an Earth year. And so the seasons would each be twice as long, okay? The big difference between Mars and Earth, okay, is none of these things. It's the gravity. Mars, no matter what we do, will always have 38% the gravity of the Earth. So if you could put an atmosphere on Mars as thick as Earth's, you would be able to strap wings on your arms and fly like a bird.
Would the difference in the length of the year, because of our evolution and where, our brains are acclimated to the sun coming up at a certain time of the year, the cycles of the seasons, would that affect the way that we act, the way that we think, and also would it affect us physically? Forget about the gravity, because I get that, I understand that, but we are used to the sun rising and the seasons happening, and a 365-day year. We have evolved with this. If we are suddenly thrown into an environment that is exactly the opposite, where now we've got a year that's not a year, it's 2 years. Would that affect us? Would it affect us mentally?
I don't know if it would affect us very much. Look, the day-night cycle is the same, okay? So that's not a big deal at all. The seasons are twice as long, but look, there are people on Earth who live in the tropics where there are no seasons, where the year is pretty much the same the whole year round. I mean, if you live at the Earth's equator, it's the same climate all forever. So people have adapted to that. I don't see why they can't adapt to a place that has seasons but are twice as long.
Well, you know, I moved from Chicago to L.A., and I don't miss the snow at all.
There you go.
You know, exactly. What is the biggest, if there is a hurdle, if there's a stumbling block, if there's one thing that is stopping this Mars mission, what is it?
It's lack of leadership. It's fear.
So it's not a technical issue? It's not?
No, it's not a technical issue. It's a question of having people have the courage to do it. And this is one reason why this private initiative stuff is so interesting. Because, you see, to get a political body to decide to do something, you need a consensus. To get a private group to do it, you don't need a consensus. You just need those people to want to do it. So the problem we have right now is the organization that has the funds to do it, i.e. NASA, doesn't have leadership, and here I mean not just NASA's leadership, but the political leadership above it, who wants to do it. And the people who want to do it, like, for instance, Mars One, don't yet have the resources to do it. But, you know, as I pointed out, there's sufficient people on this planet right now who have the wealth in their pocket to do this if they could be pulled together. So, you know, the harvest is plentiful, but the gatherers are few. We can do this. The question of whether a privately funded human to Mars mission can be done is not so much a material question as a moral question. By moral question, I mean as in morale rather than right or wrong.
Right.
Okay, it's a question of whether the troops can be rallied.
Now, listen, if anybody would like to speak with Dr. Robert Zubrin, I'm going to open up the phone lines right now, 323-825-5045. We'll get a couple of questions in before we have to say goodnight. I do have a couple of emails. And then, Doctor, if you would, I would like to go through the gallery and you know, just a quick overview for everybody what the technology is and what we're looking at. But I just got a question, and this is a great question. This just came in. The last question was from an email was from Devin. This is from Barry, and Barry says, best show yet. Has he considered maybe dropping engines and tanks from rocket shells and landing those shells on Mars to make more living and storage areas? Since it takes a pretty large rocket to boost the vehicles up, wouldn't it be a good idea to reuse older outer rocket shells? That's a great question, actually.
Well, it's just, I mean, those kinds of things are good ideas, but they're frequently hard to do operationally. I mean, what we are doing here is we're taking the HAB module that we go to Mars in, and we are reusing it, not by sending it back to Earth and sending it back and here and there, but by just keeping it on Mars and adding to it with each mission. You know, you got to go for operational simplicity. So the sorts of things he said are certainly possible, but the question is, how much of them can you do without making the mission so complicated that you invite failure?
Well, you know, it's a question of, you know, I think everybody, and myself included, you don't want to waste a perfectly fine, you know, cylinder machined and engineered, and it would just make sense to try to reuse it because it also weighs a lot.
Right. Well, the thing that you can reuse, okay, first of all, is, as say, the payload delivered to Mars, keep it on Mars, and reuse as much of the launch vehicle as you can. So if you have a multi-stage launch vehicle, the key thing is to reuse the first stage, the lowest stage, because that is the biggest stage, and also it's the easiest one to reuse because it doesn't go as high or as fast as the upper stages are. Okay? Then in succession, the next thing you want to reuse is the second stage. Okay? the stage that actually shoots the payload from Earth orbit to Mars is the smallest stage, and that probably is the one that you can afford to give up.
Next question, and this comes in from Brad. It is, isn't the problem with liquid water from low barometric pressure not the cold? Also, not enough gravity to hold on to the atmosphere. Oh, that's see, we have smart listeners here.
Yeah, you do. The temperature on Mars, the pressure on Mars is low, and this is complicated to explain. Your questioner is onto something, but it turns out that basically you could have liquid water on Mars if the temperatures are above freezing for a sufficient length of time. And in fact, it looks like there actually has been small amounts of liquid water flowing on Mars in the geologic present, and some people have identified them in recent photographs taken from orbit. But we can't have large-scale permanent flows of liquid water on Mars today because the average day-night temperature is about minus 50 centigrade. So while you can have temporary liquid water on the surface of Mars today, and apparently we do in a few places because it does get above freezing at the equator and even tropical latitudes on Mars in midday. It doesn't stay that way, and so we don't get a water cycle.
Okay.
And as far as what the other one was, is the gravity big enough to hold an atmosphere? Yeah, it is. It would lose atmosphere over timescales of hundreds of millions of years, but if you made a thicker atmosphere on Mars, it would stay there for hundreds of millions of years. It would take a long time for the gravity to lose it.
Now, and I don't want to sound not smart, okay? I'm afraid of asking this question, but I have to. Isn't there ice on Mars?
Yeah, there is.
Okay, we have a call coming in. So before I get to this question, just let the caller know that we're here for them. Hold on for a second. Okay, caller, just stay with us. Okay, are you there?
Oh, Chippy!
Okay. Stay with us. So with there being ice on Mars, doesn't that mean water? Isn't it the same thing? And why aren't we sending a probe onto the snow or the ice, melting that and figuring out what's going on there? And isn't it, if it's the same, why are we concerned with water on Mars if there's ice on Mars?
Well, okay. The Martian polar cap was first identified through telescopes on Earth in the mid-1600s. But people disputed whether this white polar cap on the surface of Mars really was ice. I think we really knew it by the 90s. But in any case, in 2007, we did land a probe right on it called Phoenix. And sure enough, it is ice. The North Polar Cap of Mars, which you can, in a good amateur telescope today, you can actually see that white cap at the top of Mars is ice. And we've landed on it and tested it, and we know that that's what it is.
Because I think that's one of the things that we need to overcome. I mean, it's already there, right? I'm wrong?
That's correct. No, you're right. Mars has water. There's ice at the polar cap. There's also, if you move away from the polar cap, but in the mid-latitudes, there are regions of Mars in which the soil is basically frozen mud. That is, the soil is majority water by weight, but it's frozen, it's permafrost. And even at the equator, there are places where the soil is 8 or 10% water by weight. So there's plenty of water on Mars. And there's carbon dioxide on Mars. And water and carbon dioxide are the two things you need to grow plants. Now, in contrast, except for a few very strange places on the moon, which are permanently shadowed and so are very super cold. There's no water on the moon, or it's only present in part per million quantities, and there's no carbon. And water and carbon are the two things you need for life. And then the third thing that is most important after that is nitrogen. And Mars has got nitrogen. It's the minority constituent of the atmosphere. There's no nitrogen on the moon. This is why Mars should be our target, because the moon is a rock. Mars is a world. It has everything that we need for life and civilization. And so Mars compares to the moon in the coming age of space exploration as North America compared to Greenland in the previous age of European maritime exploration. Greenland was closer to Europe. Europeans, Vikings, they got there first, but they couldn't establish a civilization there. It was too poor an environment. Okay, Mars is the prize.
Let's go to the gallery. Do you have the gallery open there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's just do this simply. Let's start with picture number 1. Everybody go to jimmychurchradio.com. We'll go to the homepage, scroll down. It's in the normal spot that we have it every night. The Robert Zubrin PhD, by the way. and I keep saying doctor. Is doctor okay? Should I go informal and go Robert? Or
yeah, you can call me Robert.
Okay.
What the hell? Okay.
Let's go to this first shot. What are we looking at? Picture number 1.
First shot is upper left.
Yes.
Upper left is our Arctic cap sitting out there in the snow. Then the middle one.
Well, no, let's stay on the. I have a couple of questions about this shot. There's something obviously absent here. We don't have another habitat or research facility. There's only one. 2, there's no greenhouse or anything external here. Is that done for a reason?
Well, a greenhouse is not of much use in the Arctic. Now, what there would be on Mars.
Explain why not? I mean, every house in Alaska. Don't get angry. I'm just asking. I mean, everybody's got a greenhouse in Alaska. Why wouldn't we concern ourselves with growing food here?
I take it back. You could have a greenhouse there during the summer months. Okay, but frankly, in terms of an initial Martian expedition, it's much easier for them to bring their food than to grow it. If we're talking about a Mars base, a permanent colony, then you'd want greenhouses. It's like, if you go on a trip to Europe, it's much easier to buy your food in the restaurant than it is to bring a greenhouse. And if you were just staying someplace one day, and there was no food to buy, it'd be easier to bring your food than to try to grow it. If you're staying there a week, it's easier to bring your food than to grow it. If you're staying someplace 10 years, it's easier to grow it than to bring it.
So this setup, the Arctic Research Center, again, I just want to be perfectly clear. This is what it would be. So this is what they're going to train in. There isn't anything else external, extraneous, anything that they don't need. Everything is here, self-contained, and this is how it would be on Mars, at least the first pass through.
Yeah, the only thing that there would be extra on Mars that is not here in the Arctic is a nuclear reactor, which would be positioned a few hundred yards away in a little crater, and a wire would be run from it to the hat. In the Arctic, we don't have a nuclear reactor, but we have a diesel generator, and it serves the same function.
I had also read, and let's get to the second picture, which I think I love this picture, by the way. I picked this one myself. Is if you have a couple of habitats that are kilometers away, or even hundreds of kilometers apart, for a variety of different reasons, pre-planned or not, or maybe that's just where it landed off course. Do you have a plan on how they would get from one habitat to another?
Yeah, the motorized vehicles. Now, there's 2 different concepts for the kind of motorized vehicles that we would use on Mars. The traditional one, in which I used to be a supporter of myself, is pressurized rovers, vehicles comparable to like a little SUV that have a pressurized cabin, and you're in there in a shirt sleeves environment, and you drive that way, and then when you want to go outside, you put on a spacesuit, and you go through a little airlock, and you go outside. Okay? Now, that's traveling in comfort, but it's a heavier vehicle. What we use in the Arctic, and which I now think we should use on Mars, are all-terrain vehicles, single-person equestrian vehicles. That is, you ride them in the saddle, and you're much more nimble. You're in a spacesuit. If you see an interesting rock, you don't have to suit up and go outside and get it. You just bend down and pick it up. Now, you don't have the same range in an all-terrain vehicle because you can't eat, and you can't stay out overnight in that way. But in a more limited range of operation, you have much greater capability. And if you wanted longer range, you could have the ATV tow a pressurized trailer. And that's how I would do it. Electric,
of course.
On Mars?
Yes. Or can they run on a combustion engine in some type of...
Well, that's the thing. No, the ones we use in the Arctic are just ordinary ATVs that run on
of course.
in air. But on Mars, you could either run them with batteries or you could run them with fuel cells powered, say, by methanol and oxygen, or you could have a combustion engine provided you brought an oxygen tank with you.
Right. So we could run a combustion engine.
Right, but it would be different. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go on to picture number 2.
Yeah.
In the first row, obviously this is the Arctic, and a very cool picture. But the one thing, and I want you to comment on this, it's remote.
Yes.
I don't want to, but where is the closest anything to the Arctic Research Station?
That would be Resolute Bay on a different island, 150 miles away.
So they are indeed isolated, alone. Mm-hmm. Nobody to come to anybody's rescue, at least not right away, if they needed anything. That's it.
That's it.
What are we looking at in the foreground?
The Martian flag.
And is that an antenna?
That is actually a weather station.
Okay.
And on it we have the red, green, and blue Martian flag. That red is for the red desert Mars that exists today, the green life that'll transform it, and the blue living planet it could be someday. The Mars Society is an international organization, and so we wanted to create a flag for Mars, and we didn't want to use the UN flag because the UN is a club of the current world's governments, many of whom are little more than criminal organizations. What we're saying here, when you say there's going to be a new flag, you're saying there's going to be new nations. You're saying that we are not living at the end of history, but at the beginning of history.
With okay, let's jump to the next shot. But I do have one question. Do you have the intention? Is every crew, is it two male, 2 female?
No. First of all, our crews are 6.
But the capsule would be 4, right?
When we go to Mars, it'll be 4. Not that I prefer 4. It's just that a question of how much mass can you lift. If you had more powerful launch vehicles, maybe you could consider crews of 5 or 6. But I do think the mission can be done with 4. And if the question of whether we have a mission or not depends on the cost of the mission, then 4 could be the number. But in our own mission simulations in the Arctic and in the desert, we actually have crews of 6. Now, are they all 3 and 3 men and women? No, some are. Some are 4 men, 2 women. Some are more women than men. We've had all male crews. We've had all female crews. We've had crews all drawn from one nation, and in some cases the United States. We've had an all-Canadian crew, an all-German crew. In the desert, we had an all-Russian crew. We've had fully international crews with one person from each different country. And we've had crews of different age distributions and skill distributions. We've had 140 crews in the desert and 11 in the Arctic, so really quite a variety. And
all were successful, basically. Not
all, but over 90% have been successful. And And ultimately, it is a question of the people themselves. You read these papers by theoreticians, and they say, "Oh, it should be 3 and 3 because that's how it should be," or you really want an international crew, or you really want a one-nation crew. And I tell you, we've had crews of all these different types, and some have succeeded and some have failed. And the main question is the individuals that you choose and the chemistry between them.
Makes sense, actually. I think anybody can adapt.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you could live in, downtown Manhattan where it's multicultural, and you can also get along in India, which is, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can adapt to your surroundings.
Right. Now, look, here's a point. Okay. What about international crews? International crews will work well if the people who are in the crew are internationalists.
Yes,
okay?
exactly.
Okay, international crews do not work well if the people in them are flag patriots and are very proud of their own nation and disdainful of others. On the other hand, a one-nation crew composed of flag patriots can be very effective. It's like a question. Somebody has, this may seem even like a ridiculous question in America. Can you have both Catholics and Protestants in a crew? An American wouldn't even think twice about such an issue. On the other hand, in Ireland, that might be a big deal.
Let's go to picture number 4 in the second row, the first one.
Yeah.
Because this is the MD.
Yes, that's a desert station. And it does have a greenhouse.
It does. Okay. And so what are we looking at here? What are the differences?
Well, the desert station has a greenhouse. It also has an astronomical observatory. I'm not sure if it's visible in this picture. No, from the angle you're looking at, it's not seen, but it's there. The desert, we have terrific skies there because we're at 4,000 feet in a dry climate and 4 hours away from Salt Lake City, which is the closest big city. And so very dark skies at night, very clear, and we do astronomy there as a nighttime activity in addition to the field exploration during the day.
What would we see when we look to a Martian night sky?
Well, a Martian night sky might also be spectacular. Perhaps not quite as good as the moon, but much better than any place on Earth because of thin atmosphere and obviously no cities to provide light pollution. The main thing that'd be different in the Martian night skies, instead of there being one moon, there'd be two. And they're smaller than the Earth's moon. So you get two little moons instead of one big one.
Let's go to picture number. Well, the reason why I ask about that before we move on to the next picture is all of the comments on both sides and rhetoric on both sides flying back and forth about the night sky on the moon when we were there, whether you could see stars or not, and why they weren't photographed or not, and astronauts making the comments, well, I don't even remember seeing stars unless we were looking through optics. But actually standing on the moon looking out because of the brightness, you couldn't actually see the stars.
Well, that's because they were out in the daytime.
Correct. Correct.
So the surface was emitting powerful light that made it hard to see dim objects like stars. But if they had been on the surface during the lunar night, they would have seen lots of stars.
It would have been insane, and and we could expect something almost the same on the Martian surface. First off, there's no city lights or any other, anything artificial.
And the only thing, and also on the moon, actually, one thing that would impair you on the moon a bit is the Earth, because the Earth, seen from the moon, it'd be 4 times as big a cross as the moon is as seen from the Earth.
Correct.
So it would be very bright as an object in the sky. Now, of course, if you were on part of the moon, on the far side of the moon, where the Earth was not visible, that would not be a problem. But most lunar missions anticipate being on the same side of the moon as the Earth, and therefore the Earth would be up there in the sky. But the Earth would be quite a sight to see.
I could only imagine. And, Mars we can barely see from here. I mean, we know it's red. We can stand outside and look and go, okay, there's Mars. But how big would the Earth, so the Earth would be how many times bigger?
What the Earth look like? The Earth be a very bright planet, kind of like Venus as seen from the Earth.
Gotcha. Okay, let's go to picture number 5. This is pretty cool.
Okay, now this is not one of ours.
It's not, but
artwork done by somebody else. But let me see what I can make out of it here. Okay, this shows a Mars landing craft, which apparently is also designed as an ascent vehicle too.
This is David Robinson, by the way, and
okay, David Robinson painting from about 5 or 8 years ago, and it just shows astronauts exploring on Mars. He appears to have used, to inspire his artwork, some terrestrial landscape, possibly the desert.
And my question for you is this. Is this similar to your concept of what you're envisioning as a vehicle that would return to Earth?
Well, maybe, because it could be, although my vehicle that would return to Earth, this could be a 2-stage vehicle, and with a bailout capsule at the top that looks a little bit like a re-entry capsule he has there at the top of that
right.
thing.
I think it's very similar to the Orion capsule. It looks like that's where he got the idea from.
Or the Apollo capsule.
Yeah, or a combination, right, exactly.
Yes.
Okay, next picture. Now, again, this is David Robinson. And this is his nuclear spacecraft. And
okay, now what he's got here, okay, I'll tell you what he's got. He's got nuclear thermal rocket engines here, or they certainly look like that to me.
Right.
And then he's got the big tank, and he's got a habitation module, and he's got a landing craft. Yeah.
I think the whole thing is designed to fit into a 20, and that's the way it looks to me. And with the diameter too of each stage, it looks like that standard 10 meter, 8 to 10 meter circumference.
Yes, it is. Now, and it also now this is multiple launches we're looking at here, because at a minimum, the 4 primary objects are each represent separate launches, and then some of this other stuff probably an additional. So this looks like a mission that requires 6 launches.
Okay, I got you. Feasible?
Yeah, but I believe more complex than necessary.
Gotcha. Let's go to the next one, and I'm glad you're explaining this. The next one's the inside of the MDRS. And what are we looking at here? This is downstairs?
Actually, this is the inside of the Arctic station.
Oh, this is the Arctic station? Okay.
Yeah. And this is an interesting thing. What you're looking at here, because I'm in this picture, I was there. I'm the fella in the flannel shirt. That is, and the baseball cap. Okay, at the far right.
Yes.
The fellow in the middle is a NASA human factors scientist. His name is Bill Clancy. And the one up in closest to the viewer in the blue sweater is Vladimir Pletzer, who is an ESA scientist. Now, this was actually in the very first crew in the Flashline station, the Arctic station. And what had happened was we had gone on an excursion into the crater, and Pletzer had brought from Europe this thing called a geophone, which is an instrument for sending and receiving sound signals into the Earth to do underground stratigraphy. And it's a heavy instrument. It weighed 300 pounds, and we put it into a trailer, towed it by an ATV, and we'd gone into the crater with this thing. And we're going across the crater, and all of a sudden, that trailer broke through a crust of dry dirt on top of the surface of the crater, and it was into quick mud. And then a second later, the ATV pulling it also went into the quick mud. And Vladimir and I had to struggle very hard to get these things out of the quick mud and save the ATV and the trailer, which we eventually did. And Clancy was there, but he did not help us.
Did you guys do it all in spacesuits?
Yes.
Okay.
And the quick mud in the crater would be quite deadly, except for the fact that about a meter down there's permafrost, giving a hard underground surface so that you don't keep going down. But nevertheless, it's very difficult to get stuff out.
Yeah, you're still stuck. Right.
Right. And anyway, Clancy did not participate in rescuing this equipment. And instead, he stood to the side and was filming us while we were doing this. And what was actually happening here, this is an after-action debrief going on when we got back to the hab. And Vladimir Pletzer here is really angry, and he's lighting into Clancy. You know, you didn't help us. We were in trouble. We were trying to do this thing. You just stood there with your stupid camera. And Clancy is going, so are you feeling anger right now?
Oh, that is great. Oh, man. Now, were those I looked at another set of pictures. So that's what was I'm guessing that's what was going on, was you guys were pulling this stuff out. It was an orange box, right? A large orange box. That was the rescue mission?
That's right.
I did see those. I didn't know that that's what was going on. And I could tell that there was something going on.
You're not kidding. There was something going on.
And
it was really rough. And so we're there struggling with this stuff. And Clancy is standing there filming us for his study.
Is the video posted, by the way?
No, I don't think so. But that photograph made it. And there you have it. And here in the next picture, you can see someone using the geophone. All these sensors strung out in a line here.
Right.
Okay, and then this person was actually a very athletic woman, Katie something. She was from Australia. She's taking this sledgehammer and she's banging it down, and that's sending signals into the ground, which the geophone is picking up. And so we were doing geophone studies. But this was being done here up on dry land. When we put the geophone in the trailer and tried to cross the crater, it got stuck in the mud.
I thought this was an incredible picture. That's why I picked it for a few different reasons. Obviously, there's an experiment going on. I didn't know if it was seismic or not, but that was my first guess. But because of the sledgehammer. I didn't know that was a woman swinging a sledgehammer in a spacesuit with a backpack on in the Arctic in the cold. And it's an absolute incredible picture. So that's what's going on there. Okay, next. Let's run through these really quickly. We are quickly running out of time. Thank you, by the way, Doctor.
Okay.
Let's just jump ahead. Let's skip the next one. Let's go to the middle of the bottom row, which you've got a little transport vehicle here, and you've got some equipment on it. What are we looking at here?
This is a funny one, too. Okay. This is a rover that had been built by Carnegie Mellon University called Hyperion. And so this was not our experiment. This has been brought up there by Carnegie Mellon in conjunction with a NASA project. But the person standing next to it is Charles Frankel, who's French, and he was in our second crew at the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station, and he's looking at this thing. And this, they said they brought the Hyperion to the Devon Island to test its ability to do hazard avoidance, and they had it on this plane where these people are standing. And if you could see this plane, it's a huge, flat, featureless plane. There's no hazards to be avoided. So we thought that was kind of funny because they were demonstrating that this thing could avoid hazards in a place where there were none.
How heavy is this?
How heavy is Hyperion? I don't know. Just looking at it, I'd say a few hundred pounds. It's not that heavy. You can see it's on bicycle tires.
Yeah, exactly. Was there an intention of, and looking at this, to ride? Or
No, this was meant to be an autonomous robot.
That's all it is. That's all it is. And what is the? I could see.
But I'll tell you what I thought about this because there's another part to the story here. This picture was taken on July 20th, 2001. Okay, July 20th, 2001 is 25 years to the day after July 20th, 1976, which is the day Viking landed on Mars. Okay? And by the way, we landed on the moon on July 20th, 1969. But this picture was taken 25 years to the day after we landed Viking on Mars. And what we were also thinking about here is imagine what it will be when we first land people on Mars and some human explorers encounter one of our old rovers.
Think about that all the time.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. As well we should.
Yeah. So that's kind of like what this is. Imagine human explorers landing on Mars and discovering Viking.
Now I'm going to ask, before we go, I'd like a 2-minute response. Just a quick one, off the wall question.
Okay.
Do you think humans, Earthlings, came from Mars? Do you think that? Does that ever enter your mind that maybe a million years ago?
People as such came from Mars? No, I think people evolved on the Earth. But do I think life came to Earth from Mars? Quite probably did.
On a meteorite or something similar.
Right, and there's significant evidence for this. Because, you see, we find no free-living organisms on Earth simpler than bacteria. And bacteria are really very complicated things. And with a whole complex system of encoding and duplicating information in DNA and RNA and all kinds of organelles and things, to imagine that bacteria were the first life to emerge from chemistry would be like imagining that the iPhone was the first machine. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Right,
okay,
right.
There's a whole history of machines before the iPhone. There's laptop computers and desktop computers and electronics and telephones and light bulbs and generators and the invention of metals and all of that, going back thousands of years behind the iPhone, okay? Now, of technological evolution. Now, Mars had liquid water on its surface for 1 billion years in its early history. So life could have evolved on Mars just as easily as on Earth, except that Mars had liquid water before the Earth did because it cooled faster because it's smaller. So life would have had a chance to evolve on Mars first. Okay, now, so if you believe that life naturally emerges from chemistry wherever you have the right physical and chemical conditions, then life should have appeared on Mars, and it should have appeared on Mars before it appeared on Earth, and we know that rocks are always traveling from Mars to Earth, and if they did, then they could have brought life with them, and it could very well be that life came to Earth from Mars. And we could prove this. If we could go to Mars and find get into that groundwater and bring up samples and find Martian organisms that include not only organisms that are kind of like Earth life in their biochemistry, but things that are kind of like Earth life in their biochemistry, but more primitive, okay, that includes not just bacteria, but things that led up to bacteria, then we would see that that's where the earlier history of life was. And then we might be able to see what are the missing links between life and non-life. Okay, how do you get from chemistry to life? There's nothing on Earth that shows how we get from chemistry to life.
That's right.
On Mars, we could find the missing link from chemistry to life.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. Okay, one last question. Don't laugh. What is this face on Cydonia? How did we get there? I mean,
I think that that's a natural rock formation. But once again, Okay, when we go to Mars, we'll get the answer. And anyway, I do want to just say a couple of things.
Sure.
We're signing off now.
Absolutely.
One is, if people want to know a lot more about how we can explore Mars, I've got a book. It's called The Case for Mars. It's available on Amazon. Number two, if you want to help us get to Mars, join the Mars Society. We have a society. Our website's at marssociety.org. You can go there, find out more about us, get involved. Our next international convention is going to be in Houston, Texas, near Johnson Space Center, August 7th through 10th. You're welcome to come, or even to submit a paper and perhaps be selected to present. The call for papers, it's all that at our website at marssociety.org. And the third is, if you can contribute money, we really could use your help. We have this Indiegogo campaign going right now, crowdfunding campaign. There's also good prizes and so forth with it. But we need the money if we're going to make this Mars Arctic mission happen, the one-year mission. If we could do this, we think we'll really inspire people around the world with the vision of humans exploring on other worlds and help us do it.
No better worthy cause than the Mars Society. The links are right there at on the website. You can click on Dr. Robert Zubrin's name, as always, with all guests. We'll take you straight to the Mars Society website. Also, it's some of the best reading on the internet. You've done a really outstanding job with the website, and it is just great to just sit and read through. But the donation, the join, the cruise, everything is there at marssociety.org. Okay, thank you, Doctor. I had a tremendously great time tonight, and the whole point of this show, as always, is to learn something, and I did, and I want to thank you for that.
My pleasure.
And I will talk to you soon. You have a great weekend.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Wow, that was great. Fantastic. Okay, now look, I've got 2 minutes. I just got the word. I've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds coming in from Keith. From now on, I've got to end 2 minutes early so Keith can roll his commercials over at the network. How do you like that, Keith? I'm making you the bad guy. Tomorrow night, I don't want anybody to forget Steve Murillo. We will be taking your calls for the entire 3 hours. We are going to do beer and pizza live on the air. Per Steve's request, by the way. And so that's it. Thank you, everybody, for the great questions tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and get the music rolling. Okay, Keith, it will be... Yeah, get cracking. It will be 2 minutes of music. Okay, let's get going here. Wow, what a great show. I love it. Big difference from last night, huh? Stay tuned. Coming up next, we have my favorite show, Spooky South Coast, with Tim Weisberg and his wrinkled shirt. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kumarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Announcers, Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music, Doug Aldrich. You're listening to him right now. Oh, Ed, by the way, I didn't read your email, but it was pretty cool. He knows what I'm talking about. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll see you tomorrow night with Steve Murillo. Good night, everybody. Thank you.